The Tour de Brisbane.
Brisbane and the sunny coast, the sunny state of Queensland is where we are for the Australian Unity Tour de Brisbane. And I tell you what, it is a hive of activity up here at the showgrounds in Brisbane. A fantastic location, a grand Fondo on as well today. I'm Scott McGrory. Welcome everybody to our coverage of the Australian Unity Tour de Brisbane. I'm alongside Hayley Jones, who 10 years ago this year was Junior World Champion in the team pursuit. We were just discussing that earlier, but still riding bikes yourself.
Yeah, still riding. I'm Hayley Jones. I'm from Brisbane. I'm actually from the UK, but I do reside in Brisbane now, thanks to my parents bringing me here as a child. So these are my local roads, so hopefully it'll be a good day out on the course.
We've got plenty of time today to talk about your heritage and the family history as well. We'll get into that when we get into the coverage a little bit later on. It's the National Road Series for Oz Cycling, both elite men's and elite women's races today, with the under-23s thrown into the mix as well. But we're not too far away from the actual race start, so let's get down to our man Joel Murray on the start line now.
Here we are down on the start line. Perfect conditions in Brisbane today for the Australian Unity Tour de Brisbane. 18 degrees, the wind. There's a slight little breeze down here, but clear skies. It should be a good race. I've got yesterday's champion from the Oceania race, Liam Walsh. Liam, how is it down here on the start line, mate?
It's nice and early, but yeah, ideal racing conditions. So it should be a good day out there.
Now you're the champion from yesterday. The guys were already giving you a little bit of stick. You haven't got the leader's jersey on today, so didn't get washed, didn't get on, but you got the bridge lane. You're flying the colours today. What are you expecting from today's event?
It'll be an interesting one with two Coot-thas in the middle, so it could be a small group finish if the right mix gets away over there, but otherwise there's a lot of flatlands afterwards, so it could be a bunch kick as well.
And how are you feeling for that? Those two Coot-tha climbs, about 400 metres of elevation, about 7 minutes of hurt. You're going to send it?
I'm not going to be the one sending it. I'm going to be the one hoping that the guys who are good up there don't send it. But, I mean, I've got a really good team here with Bridge Lane, so I'm sure whatever situation happens, we'll be in the right position to win, and hopefully we can get it done again.
Awesome. Good luck, mate. Good luck out there, and they are blowing the whistles. We're about go time here, so back up to you guys in the studio.
Fantastic win by Liam
luck,
Walsh
mate.
in the Oceania Road Championships yesterday. Big, powerful sprint to the end. But I tell you what, Hayley, it was a sensational finish in that Oceania Road Championships. But Brady Gilmore, who did jump away in the last 500, 700 metres, got run down by Liam right at the very line. So I imagine the ARA Skip Capital man, Brady Gilmore, will be fired up today to try and get some redemption.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be trying to give it a good go today, I think. He was second in this race last year and first in under-23s. He's got a great sprint on him. He's moved up to the Sunshine Coast now, so he's essentially a local boy who's come across from WA. I think it'll be a really good race at the top today.
Looking forward to seeing a little bit more of Gilmore as we get into the race, because he has an incredible background, comes from Supercross, motocross, did do a couple of seasons in the United States, so we can get into a little bit more detail about that later on. It's 102 kilometres for the elite men and the under-23s, and in 10 minutes or so, the women will get underway as well for 81 kilometres. On similar roads, but they're not doing the Mount Coot-tha climb as the men are. Doing 2 laps of Mount Coot-tha for the guys, but the ladies are not going to be doing that.
Yeah, the men are doing 2 laps of Mount Coot-tha, which I think will really separate the race. It's still a fair way from the finish, though. We've got about 50 kilometres after Mount Coot-tha. Plenty of time for the rest of the bunch to chase down any attacks, as the women are on a flat course, totally flat the whole race, no Coot-tha, so it will be a day for the sprinters and the women, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's certainly going to be very interesting 2 races, because they are so different. You've got a flat race on the freeway for the women, so you're going to have this sprinter type of battle. You saw Sophie Edwards from ARA Skip Capital yesterday dominate the sprint, and they'll be certainly looking to try and help her out again today. Whereas with the men, Mount Coot-tha twice. Although, Hayley, it's a long way from the second ascent of Mount Coot-tha to the finish line.
Yeah, it's still about 50 kilometres, which is quite a far way, and obviously the women is flat. Yep, Chloe Moran also from ARA Skip Capital. I think that team has definitely gone in with the expectation of it being a sprint finish.
Final adjustment of the helmet there we see from Blake Agnoletto, the lad from Bendigo in Victoria, riding for ARA Skip Capital, and we are now underway. 102 kilometres for the elite men. This is the second round of the Oz Cycling National Road Series. We had the Melbourne to Warrnambool earlier in the season. Start of February was that race, and that's one of the oldest races on the planet. It's only second in terms of age to the Liège-Bastogne-Liège Classic in Europe, and that was won by Bridge Lane's Tristan Saunders. So he is leading the National Road Series at the moment after that first race. It's going to be really interesting today. That run in to the finish after the 2 times up Mount Coot-tha, I'm fascinated to see how that goes. Coot-tha climb itself, it's really tough. It's a really steep hill, so twice up there, back to back, and there's no road in between. They come straight down, straight back up again. So you would imagine you'll have a really strong group of small group of climbers off the front, but then there's that battle of 50 Ks to see what tactically they do, if they can take it all the way to the end or not.
Yeah, and after that second Coot-tha, it is flat. It does go back onto a bit of a highway out towards the airport. So it will be one for, like, if the bunch can really get together and get it rolling, they will be moving really fast.
Yeah. So just this neutral section as we get out of town. We are at the top of King Street at the showgrounds. And it is actually fascinating how close the showgrounds in Brisbane are from the CBD itself. We're not too far from the Story Bridge as well. And the Story Bridge has been featured in the Tour de Brisbane and the Grand Fondo previously, not this time. But everyone still gets the benefit and the opportunity to ride on the freeways in and through Brisbane, which is quite unique, certainly unique in terms of a Grand Fondo event throughout Australia. So Brisbane and the council up here and state government have done an amazing job to get the roads closed and really embrace this event.
Yeah, the biggest thing I think is they get to go through the tunnels, the Legacy Tunnel, which is, you normally just drive through there in your car at 80 Ks an hour. So to ride your bike through there is always quite interesting. And in the morning at this time, it's strangely warm as you ride through. But
about 16 degrees or so this morning as the sun is just coming up here in Brisbane. Daylight savings finishing tonight as well.
exist.
So that, it doesn't exist up here, but it's just going to be finishing for the rest of Australia. So we'll get back on the same time zone on the East Coast from tomorrow. So we're looking forward to that. The businesses, no doubt, around Australia, looking forward to that as well. The nervous kilometres as they roll out from the neutral section in the National Road Series. And there are so many fresh faces as we see each year coming through. It's a very young group in terms of demographic within the National Road Series. So many young under-19s stepping up into the under-23s, and so for some of them, it's their first taste of a real battle and what it's like to ride against some of the best riders in Australia. And one thing that impresses me, Hayley, is just how well trained all of these young riders are now. And that's what we're seeing in Europe with the professionals, how many young guys like Tadej Pogacar and these riders that have gone straight up into the pro ranks and are performing well. That filters right down, even into the National Road Series level, doesn't it? With the coaching and the understanding of training, it means that the depth within National Road Series level has also improved because of the young riders that are just smarter now. They know more about training.
Yeah, and the coaching's really improved over the last few years. And you'll find a lot of these riders, I think after Grafton, a few of the teams are all starting to go to Europe for 3 or 4 months just to give them a taster. So if they do want to step into that, they're not going straight over for a whole season.
As you can see, the NRS men, the National Road Series for Oz Cycling. Tristan Saunders, we'll be looking out for him to see how he goes, if he can back up. Blackshaw Racing. Tom Chester won the Criterium the other night here at King Street. So that was great, a great performance from young Tom, and for Blackshaw to get a good win up against some of the bigger teams that are more well-known within the National Road Series. And of course, Team Bridge Lane have dominated the overall teams classification for over a decade now. So they've really looking to see what, and one of the things as to why Bridge Lane have dominated, obviously they've got good management. They select some of the best riders, have a good European program as well. But the winner of the teams classification in the National Road Series in the past were rewarded by being given 4 spots in the national team for the Tour Down Under. So it's been so important for teams like Bridge Lane to win the overall NRS teams classification to get those spots, to give their riders exposure at the TDU. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily the case going forward. There have been some changes in the regulations, but that has been such a benefit for the Bridge Lane riders. Now, for the women, though, they're about to start as well, and we know Keely Bennett is on the start line now with Joel Murray. Let's have a listen to what Keely's got to say.
And we're down here on the start line of the women's NRS race. We have Keely Bennett. Now, Keely, winner of the under-23s yesterday. Talk us through. How was it yesterday?
The course was pretty hard, but it was a sprinter's race, so I was just lucky to be there at the end and finish it off for the girls. And yeah, we'll just have to back it up for today.
And we've got 80 kilometres of fun for you out there today. Who are you're watching, and can you share any team tactics with us as well?
Yeah, well, we're definitely watching ARA, who's the team who won yesterday in our race. But yeah, I think we'll have a good hard crack at it, and yeah, we've got something up our sleeve, so no, we'll definitely hopefully put it to the man.
and last thing, we've got great conditions for you. You must be excited about today's ride.
Yeah, I'm Melburnian and it's cold this morning, so this is perfect for me.
Well, we're getting very close to start time here with the girls' NRS race. So, Keely, good luck to you and your team, and we'll see you at the finish line.
Thank you.
Back up to you.
Well, we were just talking about Team Bridge Lane, and for the women, it's the first time that Bridge Lane have had a women's team in the National Road Series, so that's great to see. And we spoke about ARA's two sprinters, Chloe Moran and Sophie Edwards. Keely Bennett is also very quick, so she's a big chance today.
Yeah, she's really stepped up in the last 12 months. She came through at Tour of Tropics last year as a bit of a step-through stand-up performance, taking a stage win. And it did surprise a few people, I think, but she's really shown that it wasn't a fluke, and she's backed it up multiple times.
I remember interviewing her at the Tour of Tropics last year, and she was so excited about getting the win. She seemed like a complete novice, that it was unexpected. But, gee, you're right. In the last 12 months, she has become a dominant force in women's racing here domestically in Australia. So we're looking forward to seeing how she progresses, and perhaps following in the footsteps of riders like Ruby Rose McGannon that have only very recently gone straight up into the World Tour. Georgie Howe's another one, come through the National Road Series straight into the World Tour.
Yeah, and I think today, looking at the race, we've got, with Bridge Lane as well, Gina Riccardo's in there, who is loving a breakaway during the start of the season in the summer of cycling.
She's obsessed with breakaways, isn't she?
Yeah, well, she knows she isn't a top sprinter, but she is fast, so she knows if she can get in a small break, she has a really good chance of winning the race.
So this is the elite women and the under-23s in Aucycling's National Road Series Round 2. And it was Sophie Edwards that did win the first round, so she is leading the overall National Road Series point standings. And that was the Tour of the Melbourne to Warrnambool for the ladies back in early February. And she really has shown some great form. You mentioned also Chloe Moran. Now, she's been really strong on the velodrome as well. Both Sophie Edwards and Chloe Moran winning national championships only 2 weeks ago at the Aucycling Track Nats here in Brisbane, as well at the Anna-Meares Velodrome. And, of course, this event is wrapping up the block of racing that we've started a couple of weeks ago with the Track Nationals. Then it was the Oceania Track Championships, and then into the time trials, the criteriums. Now the Tour de Brisbane here is the National Road Series. So it's been a fantastic couple of weeks in Brisbane.
Yeah, for those that do road and track, they've had a full racing program there. The mountain bike was on also 2 weeks ago with the Oceania Champs. So there's a few of those girls in this race too, with Hayley Oakes. She did the mountain bike. And there is actually the Junior National Champs and the Masters National Champs just to wrap up the full Brisbane Cycling Festival in a couple of weeks' time.
Fantastic. You can see a bit of a hold-up as they come up around the corner here for the ladies, still in their neutral section as they do that U-turn to get themselves out of town. Across the men now, so we do have some action in the men's race as they go through the tunnel, and this is really unique for road cycling, isn't it? That you don't get to ride through these tunnels. If you do, you're going to get in a lot of trouble normally, but this is the only opportunity you get to race through a tunnel.
Yeah, and you'll notice this part of the tunnel goes slightly downhill, and then as you come towards coming back out of the tunnel, it starts to climb back up the hill.
I did see some news footage years ago of a skateboarder in the Domain Tunnel in Melbourne going down would have been easy going down the hill on one side, but getting back up out of the Domain Tunnel, that was going to be a real challenge and incredibly dangerous for a skateboarder. I think it was like 3 a.m. or something, picked up on CCTV cameras. Don't try this at home if you're getting interested about doing that. Don't do it at all. This is the elite men's National Road Series race, all strung out as they go through the tunnel. At the front of the peloton there has been plenty of action, as there always is in the men's race. They're so aggressive, the young men of the National Road Series.
Yeah, they are, Scott, and you can see now they've started to climb back up and it's starting to bunch together a little bit more. A few people at the back there just tailing It's still strung out, but it's a funny one because not very often do you have two walls on the side of you as you're riding. So if you get too close, you might actually ride into one.
It's very well lit though. You can see the elite women still under neutral. And the two teams that we have been talking a lot about, ARA, Skip Capital and Team Bridge Lane, right up there at the front, ready to go. Also the cycling development team with Lucy Fitius. She won the Criterium the other night. So if she, a race like this, she might be able to get the better of the two dominant teams.
She did, and she won a stage of the Sunshine Coast National Series last year in a sprint finish. She's really starting to step up. She's been doing a lot of training over in WA with the team. She's from Sydney originally, but she's really stepped up, so she'll be watching those ARA girls like a hawk through this race, I think.
Well, we can see the red flag is still out for the elite women, not quite underway for them. The men we have seen go through the other end of the tunnel, but we are in Brisbane, southeast Queensland. Let's have a look at how stunning this area of Australia is. This is the view of the men's peloton. You can see one rider just off the front as they've come out of the tunnel, climbing up out of here. So it creates opportunities as they start going uphill to go on the attack. And a lot of the riders obviously nervous about Mount Coot-tha to come, the two ascents. So not wanting to waste too much energy. And that creates opportunities for the riders that perhaps don't think they have a chance to hang with the best climbers to try and get up the road before they get there.
Yeah, and this is a fast, flat, it's kind of flat section. It goes uphill here before it starts rolling up and down. But they'll be able to sit along here at 50 k's an hour if the peloton really wanted to. So I think it'll be all dependent on the wind too. It's not too windy sat here, but it could be anything out on the road.
Oh, and that, as the sun really does start to come up, that wind will pick up a little bit. It's very still at the moment, but no doubt that will change. And once we get a couple of more hours into it along the freeway, certainly there could be a bit of a challenge there. Marcus Cully it is, in the green Cash colours, Cash Park Up colours. So one rider having a go off the front. These situations, Hayley, I'm sure he doesn't want to be out there on his own. He would have attacked, hoping that would be able to drag a few other riders with him, and there's still a chance of that perhaps.
Yeah, definitely want to take a few people with you, and especially as you hit that climb, if you can get over that at least the first time still away, then you've just increased your chances of keeping on with the climbers over the second lap a lot more into the race.
Well, all bunched up at the back though, so no real effort to go after him. One rider like that off the front's not a real danger to the depth and the strength of a peloton like this and the NRS teams. But if you start getting a good combination of mixed teams going out in the breakaway, that's when things change. We can see they are really starting to string out now. So the attacks are definitely coming behind our lead rider, that's for sure. He's not too bothered to look over the shoulder though. Happy to just force it ahead.
Yeah, he's just keeping to ride along, but you could see their big bunch strung out. Someone is on the front chasing. One of the teams must have decided that it's time to get moving. They don't want to let the gap get too big.
Good cadence. Good cadence for now. And still not looking behind to see if there's anyone coming across to him. So he's really committed to this, whether it's solo or if a group does get across.
Yeah, and you can see there all the local cyclists out for their very early morning Sunday ride, because we're in Queensland and everyone rides at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
4:30 even as I was driving in this morning. But
Wow.
he has really opened the gap there.
I actually also passed on the way in. I passed a few people that were still walking home from nightclubs as well. So you got that crossover between super fit cyclists going out early and the clubbers making their way home, stumbling back into bed. And I am glad that he was going faster than the social riders on the side of the road. Sometimes they can put in a burst of effort where it makes it look like the pros or the semi-pros are not that strong. But no, he was comfortably going faster than the guys on the bike path.
Yeah, and now we can see the women back in the tunnel. They are spread across the road, so pressure's not on too much at this point. They are in the part where it's starting to drive back uphill and out of the tunnel. It's always a really good experience to ride through here, especially if you're one of the local Brisbane people that usually just gets to drive their car through on the way to work in the morning.
Well, Cully still forging ahead in the men's race. And I imagine there will be some action at the front of the peloton of the elite women's and under-23s race as well, once they start coming up out of the tunnel. And the pace slows a little bit as they climb up, and that may be encouraging for the riders to go on the attack, as we have seen here with the elite men. Eagerly awaiting the pictures of the peloton just to see what the configuration of the front of that main group is here for the men. The Australian Unity Tour de Brisbane, where they had the Oceania Road Race Championships yesterday for all the different categories as well. Under-19s had their own separate races, which was also good to see. And sometimes in the National Road Series, the 19s are mixed in with the elites. And in the last season was the first time they started to do some real separate races for the under-19s, which was really encouraging.
Yeah, and in this race, the under-19s are in the race. This isn't a separate under-19 national series, so it is just all combined.
It makes it tough, doesn't it, for the young riders? Big step up.
Yeah, but you'd be surprised. Will Holmes last year, second year under-17, I think it was Tour of Tasmania, stepped up and was in the top 5, top 10 in every stage, and 16 years old.
And it perhaps goes back to what we were chatting about before, about just how well developed the young riders are now. So much better educated about training, about nutrition, because it's not just go out there and train hard. And then, majority of them have power cranks or power pedals, so they understand exactly how they have to train and how many watts they need to put out to get better. But they also have to understand their recovery, their sleep patterns, and also their nutrition. And these young riders, like Will Holmes, have certainly done very well at that, and they're well guided as well by their coaches.
Yeah, and I had a chat with a couple of the NRS girls this morning who were here at 4:45 warming up to race. They had to get up and eat their breakfast at 3 o'clock this morning, which is tough for any athlete to be ready and awake to actually be able to have your nutrition for the race at that time in the morning.
Yep. So on the right-hand side, we can see the leader of the men's race. On the left, it's the back of the peloton of the women as they're still making their way through the tunnel. And they'll be popping back out into the sunlight not too far away, actually, for them. Yeah. And I know behind us, where Hayley and I are sitting, commentating, we are at the showgrounds on a balcony and overlooking the showgrounds area, and there's a lot of bustling, all the riders that are getting themselves ready for the Grand Fondo that it is following behind the elite races. So the two races out there on course, and you can see behind us now, as I was just mentioning, the showgrounds in the background, and just down below underneath our balcony commentary position here, Hayley, lots of bustling, lots of excited voices of riders that are really keen to get out there and do the Grand Fondo. Yeah,
so the Grand Fondo still also goes over Mount Coot-tha, and it is a UCI qualifying event for the Grand Fondo World Championships later this year. So a lot of people out there still just as serious as the NRS, just in a different way for them.
Yeah, and let's clarify that a little bit. So qualifying event. So if you want to go and ride the World Grand Fondo Championships, and it's a separate thing from what we understand as National Road Series elite level racing. It's a fantastic event for people that are really keen, really fit, and just want to go without trying to be that real top elite group. And this is an event that does get you, I think you've got to finish in the top 25% or something like that to get into that, to qualify. But it means people come from all over Australia to Brisbane because this is such an opportunity to go on to that next level at the UCI level.
Yeah, and for them it is basically an essential essentially it is a World Championships for their age group.
Yeah.
So they can race in their age group at their World Championships. So it's not an elite World Championships, but for them it's their age group World Champs.
Absolutely. So there's so much going on here. The elite race plus the Grand Fondo as well. But what we did have through in the week was some exceptionally elite performances in the Oceania Time Trial Championships. Let's have a look back at how that went. Stunning southeast Queensland and the state's thriving capital city of Brisbane host the Oceania Track, Road and Time Trial Cycling Championships as part of the Brisbane Cycling Festival. Throw in the LA King Street Criterium and the Tour de Brisbane road race and you have a bumper few weeks of racing. The lumpy course for the Oceania Time Trial was a perfect test. A 21-kilometre circuit shaped like an F, the riders, starting 1 minute apart, had 2 turnaround points where they would see their opponents and get a rough gauge as to whether they were up or down on time in the race for championship medals. The under-23 women, Queenslander Isabel Carnes winning ahead of Ali Anderson from South Australia's Cervelo Zip Track team and Dubbo's Hayley Fuller. The top 3 only separated by 34 seconds. In the under-23 men's time trial, it was a trifecta for ARA Skip Capital, with Oliver Bledden in bronze, Hamish McKenzie silver, and Brady Gilmore winning gold in a time of 27:16, which would have won him the elite race. The former motocross rider continues to impress as a cyclist. In the elite women's race, Celestine Franz was pushing hard over the small but speed-zapping hills, and the DRG Knights rider was heading towards a bronze medal for Australia. New Zealand's Bromlin McGregor was also quick. She caught and passed Ella Falzarano from the Manly Warringah Club. McGregor would shave 8 seconds off Franz's time to win silver. But flashing home to win the gold with a super fast time, 1 minute faster again, Georgia Perry took the title for New Zealand, ahead of Franz and McGregor to claim a Kiwi 1-2 finish.
It was pretty tough, yeah. I didn't think it would suit me very well, but I just rode it to quite conservatively and tried to come home strong and it worked out.
The elite men hit the course and were motoring along the faster sections. Ben Dybel, now riding for the Japanese team Victory Hiroshima, is handy against the clock, 8th at the Australian National TT this season. He also won the Tour of Taiwan last year and continues to show good form, finishing 4th here. In the St George Continental team colours, Riley Fleming was confident of a good ride. And it would be. The Queenslander that's seemingly always competitive was 7 seconds faster than Dybel. He would stand on the podium in 3rd. Up next, former rower and powerful time triallist Jordan Villani. He was 4th at the 2022 Australian Time Trial Nationals. Hungry for a medal in Brisbane, it was another solid performance from the Victorian. 20 seconds quicker than Fleming, but he couldn't match the super fast New Zealander Thomas Sexton, who won gold.
Bit of a shorter course this year, so had to really get after it right from the gun, and we're starting straight up a climb, which is pretty brutal, and it's just rolling the whole way, nowhere to sort of be a time trialist, I guess, and just get into your power numbers and stuff. So it probably favoured a stronger rider.
The 2023 Oceania Time Trial champion from New Zealand, Thomas Sexton.
Up next, some of these riders will tackle the LA King Street Criterium, and they'll all eagerly line up for Saturday's Oceania Road Race Championship. Great performance there from Tom Sexton in the elite men's time trial. The New Zealander, Commonwealth Games team pursuit champion. So he's good on the short distances on the velodrome and just shows over the longer distances in the time trial as well. He was silver in that race last year. Also second in the road race last year, so he's very good in the time trials.
Yeah, very good. And then also I think he was 3rd in the road race yesterday. So, and they've jetted straight off to Europe last night, ready for their season.
Oh, no, I didn't even know that. So, yeah, that's okay. Right. I was wondering why he's not on the start list today. So, there you go. Riding for the Black Spoke team out of New Zealand. So, really strong outfit, actually. It's a pro-continental team. We don't have any pro-conti teams in Australia. They're all continental or the Jayco Alula World Tour team. So, great to see New Zealand stepping up as well with a team like that.
Yeah, like one of those second-tier teams, but really there to race.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we do have an interview. We're going to catch up with Chloe Newen from the Prince Charles Hospital. She's working with a charity organisation, Common Good.
Yeah, thanks there, Scott. We're down here with Chloe on the Common Good. And Chloe, tell us all about the foundation.
Thank you. So the Common Good is an initiative of the Prince Charles Hospital Foundation. So we support medical research, which we're really proud of. So heart disease, lung disease, mental health and dementia. And today we're down here at the Australian Unity Tour de Brisbane, and our incredible cyclists have been raising funds for transplant research. So we've got about 30 different projects on foot at the moment trying to help people pre-transplant, post-transplant and have a successful transplant. And we're so grateful for the community to getting on board today.
And of course, you've got some inspiring stories out there riding today. I know
That's
Kate
right,
Phillips is
yes.
out there, double lung and heart transplant.
Yes.
She's taken on her 5th Tour de Brisbane.
Yes.
Talk us through some of the highlights of being involved with those great athletes.
Yeah, I think it gives, the number one thing is it gives hope.
Yep.
So we had a gentleman here the other day, he is waiting on a double lung transplant at Prince Charles Hospital. He's actually competing in the community ride today on an e-bike, but it's giving him hope. So seeing people like Kate, who've had a successful transplant, she's a triathlete, she's an Iron Woman, she's an absolute all-round brilliant person, and she's the reason why people are saying cycling, I can still do this. I can still do it, and it's uplifting people. We have so many people here in the crowd today who are post-bone marrow transplant, lung transplant, heart transplant, or they may be waiting on a transplant themselves. So it's a great opportunity to use sport to rally people together.
It's really a great thing, that sport, this event, and it must be special to be part of this. And haven't we turned it on in Brisbane today? How great is it to be in Brisbane?
Brilliant.
18 degrees, no humidity. You couldn't ask for a better morning.
It's absolute perfection.
And how do we get involved? How do we support the Common Good and the Prince Charles Foundation?
So I would love everybody to head to thecommongood.org.au. Not only can you actually donate and support our riders and our research, but you can read about some of the incredible projects that we're actually supporting.
Fantastic. So back up to you, Scott and Hayley, in the studio, because rip into that action with the NRS race.
It's always inspiring to hear about some of these fantastic stories and Common Good doing a fantastic thing, and to know there's a double transplant person in the Grand Fondo today. That is so good. And I know in my role as the race director for the National Road Championships, in the last couple of years we've brought in the paracyclists to be involved with our championships as well. And while they have loved it, it has been such a benefit to the actual event itself and to all the able bodies and everybody around the championships. They just get so much inspiration because the paras in particular have an incredible attitude about life.
Yeah, you do see that they are just happy to be there, and they're happy that they can still get out and do. They're competing a lot of the time. And she did say he was on an e-bike. So e-bikes have really made cycling more accessible to more people around the world.
Well, you can see plenty of action happening in the elite men's race. And we did have Marcus Cully that was off the front, and it looks like he may have been replaced by somebody else, but you can see the peloton definitely not too far behind. So a lot of scrambling happening as the men still looking to try and force a group off the front before they do get to the Mount Coot-tha climb. To a sense of that, remember, they go straight up the climb, and as Hayley said, they're going the harder side. And right at the very start, Hayley, you said, is one of the most steep sections of the climb itself. So it's a smack in the face as you turn onto the hill.
Yeah, so before the climb, there's the climb, and it's really steep, and then you turn and you drop down a little bit and start climbing. And it does look like it's the Cash team that really are trying to push the front today. Potentially two of them there.
Well, they have South African Brendan Davids, who is a really strong rider. I remember, you go back a few years, he burst onto the National Road Series scene. And he dominated the Tour of the Tweed, actually not too far south of here, the Tweed Valley in northern New South Wales. And he won one of the stages by close to 6 minutes. And that was to signal his arrival in Australia in the NRS. It was an incredible performance for the South African.
Yeah. Now we can see the two Cash riders, and it looks like NCMG are trying to bridge across. Maybe with one of the local teams, the Scody powered by Balmoral team on the back. They are not an NRS team, but they've put a team in today as it is their local race, mixed with a couple of young guys coming through. Yesterday's under-19 road champion, he's in that team.
And so you ride for Balmoral?
I am Balmoral.
Yeah, so you can talk them up. It's your club, absolutely. And it's not just talking them up, because they are such a strong club here in Brisbane, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. So yesterday they won the under-19 road race in the men's, and then obviously Liam Walsh as well in the under-23 and elite road race. And Izzy Khan second in the under-23 women's road race.
Well, they're not letting up, that's for sure. The men still scrambling to try and get this group off the front, form a breakaway. But on the fast roads, it's so difficult, isn't it? Highway roads like this, freeway, it's really difficult to try and get a group off the front. But as we've seen so often in the past in the National Road Series, the young men of the NRS will not stop trying. They seldom roll around. Always aggressive. Everyone thinks they've got a chance to get away, and they will keep doing that until something happens. And if it doesn't before Coot-tha, then it definitely will once they go up the climb.
Yeah, I definitely think on the climb it'll split up. I think it will come back together, maybe not everyone, but into some smaller groups after the climb, and then it'll be a lot of chasing one another in towards the finish.
Well, bunching up here. So all back together. You can still see the green colours of Keisha on the front though, and no moves from the back. And for the riders that are really focusing on Coot-tha, they don't want to get involved in this. They want to be saving their legs as much as possible because of the severity of the climb.
Yeah, they'll be hiding in that front third of the field, but not touching the front, ideally. You don't want to be at the back, because as you go over the top of the bridge on the highway, it will string out, so you'll end up having to chase back on. So just sitting in that front section will be really important along here, but just keeping yourself tucked in.
And we see a bit of a rise here on the highway. It's just getting towards the top now, but one of the worst when I was racing, the worst type of climb that I always found was the big, wide freeway climbs. Just big, long, straight road. Everyone's right across the road. I much prefer to get into, I wasn't a climber, but I much preferred to get onto the lefts and the rights and the switchbacks and the normal sort of alpine type of climbs, whereas these big freeway ones, I hated them terribly.
Yeah, they're just quite steep, and also the bunch tends to bunch together, so there's a lot less wheels to slip through if you're not a climber. You can't start at the front and slide your way back to the front. It's the front, and then all of a sudden you're at the back.
Well, we can see the green colours towards the front still. So the Keisha guys being very prominent at the front of the peloton. Down the other side now of that little roller that they've gone over. No attacks at this stage. And look, just back to Balmoral, your mum, Louise Jones, who's a national or international level commissaire and Commonwealth Games gold medalist back in the day, very well-known Welsh rider, which is your background. You are Welsh, and for those listening at home, you wouldn't guess it because there's no accent whatsoever. Where did that go? How did your Welsh accent disappear?
Well, when you start school halfway through year 7, children are mean, and they want to know
in
why
Australia, that is. So starting school in Australia in year 7, yeah?
Yeah, I moved to Australia in year 7, so I was 12, and people just thought that I sounded funny, so I really put an effort into not. And by the time I was probably 13, I sounded like a little Australian child.
Oh, okay. Oh, and what a shame, I must say, what a shame that you did feel the peer pressure to have to drop your accent. But kids can be so mean, can't they? And not much understanding going on there.
Yeah. But, you know, at the moment starting to feel a little bit more Australian in the last few years, as much as I hate to admit it. I think I'll be living here in my nice, warm, sunny Brisbane for the rest of my life.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Does that change if you watch the Rugby World Cup and Australia plays Wales?
Yeah, look, we're Wales through and through for the rugby. And to be honest, probably in any sport, Commonwealth Games always gives me a little bit of a tough one because it is Wales and I feel Welsh. And then watching your friends in Australia versus your friends in Wales race each other, you're like, I don't know who I want to support more.
I always enjoy 20 Tour de France champion Geraint Thomas when he proudly announces how Welsh he is, and whenever he congratulates the Welsh rugby team if they do well. They certainly do stick together, the Welsh. Yeah. Beautiful part of the UK as well. I went there after the Track World Championships in 1996 back in the day, and I had a holiday in Wales. Beautiful place.
So I would have been 1 then.
Yeah. I was very old. I still am.
But absolutely beautiful place.
Well, we can see the view from the back of the peloton. This is off the Commissaires car, so Com 1. Just getting a view of the back. But they're not just time trials this week and all the other events that we've had. We've had the King Street Criterium. We'll have a look at that a bit later on as well. But let's have a look at an event that you did yesterday, Hayley Jones. It was the Cyclocross here in the middle of the showgrounds. And you can see the dirt section there. That is the old Speedway track. I don't know the last time they had a Speedway race here at the showgrounds. But how good is Cyclocross? It was a really good vibe.
Yeah, cyclocross is awesome. It's starting to really build in Queensland. It's always a bit tough here. It's quite dry. We do get some monsoon though, so you will find a lot of the races do have a bit of mud. Yeah. But you can see here through the day, there was multiple different categories, from people on mountain bikes to the elites at the end of the day, where they do actually measure your tyres and you have to, ride a traditional cyclocross bike.
Yeah, it is interesting that cyclocross in Australia has started to take off, but it really did grow in the southern states, in Victoria in particular, because they do have a genuine winter. And it takes the skills to pay the bills. Perhaps a future star of cyclocross going across the line there. It is quite ironic to have cyclocross in Brisbane. It's a traditional European winter sport in the snow, in the sleet, the terrible cold conditions, yet in Brisbane, it's all dusty and nice and warm.
Yeah.
It's my kind of cyclocross, actually. Next move has come in the men's race. 2 riders now getting themselves off the front and struggling to see the peloton. So the gap has opened up really quickly. This is a good, strong move.
Yeah, it looks like one of the tandem riders, another Brisbane team, they are an NRS team. They're off the front. And then Van Dam Butterfields Racing, which is a local Adelaide team.
Damien Fessely from Tandem Co. on the front, doing really well to get himself off the front. And Butterfields, they have been strong, haven't they, over the last couple of years, really started to develop. And it's tough for some of the sort of second, third, fourth sort of ranked teams in the NRS. If you have a really good, strong rider that comes through your team, they quickly get snapped up by the ARAs and the bridge lanes of the NRS. So it makes it hard for the smaller teams to, continually be competitive. So good to see Butterfields having a real crack.
Yeah, and it looks like it's Jason Thomason and then also Damien Vesley off the front. But like you said, these teams are a bit smaller, and often then, like Brady Gilmore last year, they'll get a good result and then they'll be on a team and off to Europe within a few months. So it is good to see these smaller teams stepping through and hoping that some of these teams can keep their talent and really be able to give stage wins and tour wins at the NRS a good crack.
Absolutely. It's a 102 kilometres total distance for the men. The Australian Unity Tour de Brisbane, 2 times over Mount Coot-tha, as we have mentioned. And the Commonwealth Games raced up the Commonwealth Bank Classic was an event that started after the 1982 Commonwealth Games as a legacy event, and the first stage prologue time trial was up Mount Coot-tha back in the day. Really tough start to that tour, going way back. It's 1982, Hayley. You weren't 1 year old then, that's for sure.
Well, I'm really glad that event doesn't exist anymore, because a time trial at Mount Coot-tha sounds horrific.
It sounds awful, doesn't it? Yes. I am eagerly waiting to hear about the course for the Brisbane 2032 Olympic Games. So that'll be really interesting to see just what sort of course will be unveiled, whether it is Brisbane or Sunshine Coast or back of the Gold Coast. We're still not sure exactly where it's going to be, but eagerly looking forward to that. And for all of us in cycling in Australia, or sport in Australia, and particularly in the southeast Queensland and Brisbane region, the next 9 years is going to be so exciting, building towards the Olympic Games.
Yeah, you can already tell they're starting to talk about what buildings and stadiums they're going to build. I think for the road race, if it did go up Mount Coot-tha, that would just be the icing on the cake to go and watch. Really good for spectators. You can watch all down the side of the roads on the lead-in.
There's now the Tour de Brisbane and the Brisbane Cycling Festival. That did start before the announcement that Brisbane had won the Olympic Games. So this has just been a fantastic transition for this event, because this will be such a legacy moving forward for the Olympic Games as we get closer. However, it's already started to happen that infrastructure, money, focus is starting to happen, because the Criterium circuit here, Moree, that's already been announced that they're going to do a major upgrade on that as well.
Yeah, so that's actually the home of the Balmoral Cycling Club, which we were talking about before, and they have started now. I live just down the road from there. It's all fenced off. they're starting to build a new Criterium track in the middle, and it's going to have multiple options for training and racing in different ways. So you can cone it off, and it can have chicanes and be more like racing crits in Europe rather than just riding in a circle.
I actually went last week during the Track National Championships, went out to ride around the course because I'd never ridden around the Criterium course at Moree, but there is construction happening at the moment, so I was only able to do 3/4 of a lap. I was going to throw a few laps in and just see what it's like, but I could only do 3/4 of a lap before I had to get back out onto the road. But I'm looking forward to seeing how that develops over the years once they do finish that off. It'll be such a great hub for the local cycling scene up here, and any council around Australia, if they really want to improve safety for one, obviously, but also the local club racing scene, look at investing in a Criterium course.
100%. And even other help, like there's other people there every day. They're making a walking track on the new one, which will be awesome. People out there running, riding with their kids, just keeping active. Like the environment that you have around you really can make a difference to overall health of the people in the area.
Yep. It's Hayley Jones that you're hearing. So the former Welsh, but now Aussie cyclist. And I'm Scott McGrory. This is the Australian Unity Tour de Brisbane. Second round of the National Road Series for both elite men and the elite women. We just saw the men. There's an attack off the front, 2 riders away. And for the women now, some moves happening also on the front. The pink colours starting to come to the front and really starting to stretch the peloton out. So this is great to see. We spoke about this, Hayley, that the women's race was... Everyone just assumed it's going to be a bunch sprint, but there are teams out there that don't have sprinters that want to try and mix it up.
Yeah, and that looks like Cassia Boglio, who's just attacked up the hill over the top of the highway. She is definitely not a sprinter, but she is quite fast, and she does really well in a crit. She was the WA crit champion last weekend or the weekend before. So she's really going to give this a good go, and she will push over all the little hills just to try and scrub the speed off the sprinters a little bit. The
DRG Knights team, which used to be called the Knights of Suburbia Squad, and they have Celestine Franz, who was third in the time trial at the Oceania Championships a couple of days ago. Boglio, as you just mentioned, and also Courtney Sherwell from Bendigo, who was the former mountain biker that's been doing really well and showing some strength in the National Road Series.
And then they do have their sprinter, Ella Sibley. She didn't race yesterday. She raced the crit on Friday night, and then she saved her legs yesterday, so she'll be giving the sprint a good go at the finish, I think. So hence her teammates doing the work at this point.
Ella Simpson also for the DRG Knights. Now, Sibley did have a crash in the Criterium, so let's hope that she is of full health today and really can contest for the sprint at the end. 21-year-old, I think, out of South Australia. Former junior under-19 world scratch race champion. So that just shows how good she is in a bunch kick.
Yeah, she also got second in the Keirin that year and then went to track sprint for 2 years before Ashley Kudinoff, her coach. Ashley and Kudinoff, Australian Olympic team pursuit. Her now coach converted her back to the good side. She came back to the endurance riding after a few years at the sprint.
Showing some endurance bias, I think, is what Ashley Kudinoff did there. Like, forget about that sprint stuff. Come back over to the leave the dark side and come back across to our side and do the endurance stuff. So she does show some all-round ability, that Ella Sibley. So you look out for her towards the end of the race in the pink colours, see if she can get amongst the sprinters like Chloe Moran and also Sophie Edwards, both with the ARA Skip Capital team. We've mentioned those two already because, you know, they really are. When you're putting it on, you're writing down your list of the favourites, those two really do come to the top. But they are teammates, so they have to sort out how they set up that finish, that's for sure.
Yeah, and you might find one day it was for Sophie yesterday, it could be for Chloe today. Always hard. We don't know. We're not in the team. We haven't heard their team plan. But you can see here now that DRG Knights have made a bit of a gap. They've taken a few people with them. It looks like Bridge Lane. It might be Hayley Fuller. Might be Gina Ricciardo. It's a little bit hard to tell at the moment. Then you've got Georgia Wilson behind, also from the Balmoral team. She raced in the under-19 women's road race yesterday. And Lauren Bate from ARA. She's a first-year under-19, and she's really stepped up this year.
Emily Watts, perhaps, in the Team Bridge Lane colours. She's aggressive, knows how to do a bit of a sprint as well. She doesn't look like a sprinter because she's quite tall and lean, but she was really strong in the USA last year, doing the criteriums over there. Showed that she was actually not too bad in a bunch sprint as well.
And she also won a stage of the Santos Festival of Cycling last year when it was the NRS race in a bunch sprint finish against the teams like Jaco Alula.
She just started a new podcast as well. I've seen that pop up on her social media. And the latest episode was interviewing Pat Shaw, who was the man behind getting that team together. So I haven't had a listen to it yet, but that'll be interesting to hear Emily basically interviewing technically her boss. You've got to be really careful about what questions you ask your boss.
Yeah, and he did. He self-funded that team, fundraised himself that team and got Bridge Lane on board, and he got it from essentially an idea to a team within probably 3 weeks.
Yep, so good to see the and Bridge Lane as a men's team in their various sponsors over the years have been dominant in the National Road Series. So great to see them now stepping up with the women's team as well. And you can see some of the riders as they're going up the hill on the right-hand side just starting to struggle a little bit.
Yeah, so the men are about, from my experience, they're about a quarter of the way up at the back of the Mount Coot-tha climb, and you can see people starting to struggle already. It will split up over this climb.
Oh, there's no question. If you a cyclist in the southeast Queensland, Brisbane area, and you've been over Mount Coot-tha, you know what they're going through right now. It is a tough hill. They'll go straight over the top, back down to the bottom, and then immediately turn and come back up the climb again. So fantastic opportunity for the pure climbers of the National Road Series to really make their mark here in the Tour de Brisbane.
Yeah, and as you can see, we just went past the 2K to go sign, so it's not a short hill. It's about 2.5K. It's quite long, and then once you're over the top, it does keep rolling. It doesn't just flatten off.
And the women just getting out of the saddle as it's Courtney Sherwell in the pink colours, I think. And Emily Watts up there as well, the Bridge Lane colours.
Yeah, and then you've got some more Bridge Lane behind, and Matilda Reynolds, she sat in there. She got second yesterday. She's climbing very well at the moment, even though this is a flat stage, but she's traditionally a sprinter. So she's really moved into that more all-rounder type rider in the last couple of years.
Well, I mentioned Pat Shaw, just by chance, as you say that about Matilda, and you can see a bit of a move here that's happening at the front, and it is Courtney Sherwell that's really starting to push the pace now for the Knights, formerly the Knights of Suburbia. Now they are the DRG Knights. And Courtney is not a sprinter, so she wants to make this race really hard. So great to see Courtney Sherwell really pushing the pace here and trying to hurt the legs of those pure sprinters. Now back to Matilda Reynolds. She does have Pat Shaw as a coach, and he really has transformed her from that pure sprinter. And she comes from triathlon, a triathlon background. It's a few years in the past now, but she has made that transition into pure cycling. She was much more of a sprinter to start with, but she has got herself over some pretty big hills in the National Road Series in these last couple of seasons. The question is, if you become a better climber, if you've got a sprinter background, does it hurt your sprint at the end? And you don't want to sacrifice your strengths for your weaknesses, otherwise you become okay at everything rather than great at one thing.
Yeah, and I think she is still sprinting really well. She did win a stage of the Bay Crits at the start of this year, so she's definitely still sprinting quite well. I think she's definitely improved her climbing phenomenally the last few years, and she's really looking like she's going to have a strong season. She is riding for herself this year. She went to Europe last year by herself. I'm not 100% sure on her plans this year. I'm not sure if you have more insight than me.
No, I haven't spoken to Tills for a little while. That's her in second position behind Emily Watts. So the colours of the front, and there's been a crash at the back, so that's really unfortunate. Pace was off, but just a lack of concentration, perhaps a squeeze as they came to the bottom of that little descent there. And unfortunately, someone has gone down. That's terrible. Hopefully they can get themselves back up and into the race. But it was Emily Watts in the blue colours of Team Bridge Lane on the front, and in second position was Matilda Reynolds in that privateer colours. And I think I'd be surprised if she doesn't head back overseas. I think she really did enjoy that trip last season.
Yeah, and I think she really wants to try and step into a European team, so going to be able to, she got a guest ride on a few good club teams, so she really got to race in with them. And now we've got Courtney Sherwell again. She really is trying to pick this pace up. She doesn't want them just to roll at 30 kilometres an hour down the highway, and Rachel Wales from ARA is right on her heels. She's not a climber, not a sprinter. She is a climber. She's trying to become a bit of a more all-rounder because she knows in Europe if you're going to be a pure climber, you have to be a pure climber. And she's very strong. She's got a very good time trial on her too for someone who's smaller in stature.
Pocket rocket.
Yeah.
And we see the cycling development colours, the multiple colours really stand out in the peloton in third position there. Gina Ricciardo, I think perhaps from Bridge Lane in behind her. Reynolds is still up in the mix. So good move again by Sherwell. Stretches the peloton, but it doesn't snap. So that's a real challenge. A lot of teams and riders paying attention to Sherwell's attacks. So just not quite able to get a gap over the field to then really capitalise on these attacks of Sherwell.
Yeah, and DRG Knights, they don't want to take this to a bunch sprint, and if they do, they want to tire out the sprinters. They don't want them going in fresh.
And that's a tough job. It's easy to say it, isn't it? You can keep attacking and attacking, thinking you're making it hard for everyone, but on a big, wide, fast road like this, if you're a smart sprinter, tuck yourself in the middle of that peloton, really, just tapping along on the pedals, and it's not that difficult at all, even when it strings out.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing on this race. Without Mount Coot-tha, it's really going to be a Sunday ride for a few of the girls. It sounds really bad, but they are tucked in. They can keep them, if you're on the front, it's hard, but if you're tucked in we call it the little bubble, fifth wheel in the middle, everyone bubbles around you and you can sit in the perfect spot. And if you can work out how to ride there, then you can sit there all day and you'll never touch the wind.
Well, it was a bunch sprint for the Melbourne to Warrnambool earlier this year. And it was the Colac to Warrnambool for the ladies. And Sophie Edwards got the win over Chloe Hosking. So Hosking rides for the Roxalt Liv Schramm team, but she was in the World Tour for a long time. Came back from the Trek team and then is based back in Australia. Not here racing this weekend, though. So Chloe Hosking, another pure sprinter that would have enjoyed this type of race. So a little bit surprised that Chloe hasn't come up. And I know the team is not focusing so much on the National Road Series this year. They are a bit more of an off-road team this year than what they have been. Run by Peter Mullins, of course, multiple national champion on the dirt, cyclocross, gravel, and also mountain bike. So a little bit of a change of focus for that particular team, which is perhaps not to the absolute liking of someone like Chloe Hosking, who would be really dangerous on a race like this today.
Yeah, Peter Mullins also won the National Road Race. Can't remember exactly what year. It was about 2015 or 2016. But yeah, Chloe Hosking would have loved this race. However, I think with yesterday being quite it was meant to be a climber's course, but it was won by a sprinter, so you never know. It's a long way to come for a race just for one day.
But it's southeast Queensland. It's Brisbane. It's worth coming. It's such a nice place, isn't it? Pop down to the Gold Coast or head up to the Sunshine Coast, whichever takes your fancy. And there's always that conversation, isn't there? If you come to Queensland from down south, where do you go to holiday? Do you go to the Sunshine Coast or do you go to the Gold Coast? I grew up on the Gold Coast, so it's easy for me. I'll just go home, back to the Goldie, but so many people prefer the sunny coast over the Gold Coast.
I'm all for the Sunshine Coast. Sorry, Scott, we're going to have to disagree there.
We can debate that one all day.
I've been trying to convince my partner that we're going to move there, but it's not going very well because he said, what would we do for work? Which makes good points. We both have jobs in Brisbane. But it's only an hour. We can go there on the weekends when we're not at bike races, which is most weekends, but so close that we can get up there any time.
What about the train? Is there a good rail service from the sunny coast down? Now got the one from the Gold Coast heading up to Brisbane.
It doesn't go to the beach itself. It goes to Nambour and then you can get the bus, or to Landsborough and then you can get the bus.
Well, we can see the women on their way out on the course. Courtney Sherwell in the pink colours has been the most animated of the ladies. But let's go down and see what Joel Murray is up to. I think he has one of the Grand Fondo participants.
And here I am down here, Scotty, with Smalley Williams, and you're about to take on 110 Ks out there in the Grand Fondo as part of the Australian Unity Tour to Brisbane. Mate, you excited about this one?
Oh, I hope I finish it.
And have you done it before? You're a seasoned man at the Coot-tha climb.
Yeah, not a problem.
So what's the highlight of the Coot-tha climb? I did it a couple of years ago, halfway up. A few guys were from out of town and they said, are we there yet? And I said, mate, we're only halfway to go. So any great stories from your previous Grand Fondos here?
No crashes, no problems. The best part of Coot-tha is finishing it. But no dramas.
Fantastic. We'll throw it back up to you, Scott.
This is the Australian Unity Tour to Brisbane. It's the women's race. The men have been fighting their way up over Mount Coot-tha, the first of two ascents. For the ladies, though, they are out on the freeways, and it's Gina Ricciardo on the front in the blue colours. ARA, Skip Capital, all sort of gathering towards the front as well. So they're all the ones we haven't seen. We spoke about Sophie Edwards, spoke about Chloe Moran. Haven't seen either of those riders anywhere near the front.
Haven't seen them at all. You can see Georgia Whitehouse. She's moved up to the front now. She's another one of the top sprinters from the ARA team. She's moved over there this year. She's living on the Sunshine Coast. I mostly see content of her surfing. She's living the Sunshine Coast dream at the moment, I think.
Absolutely. Another plug there for the sunny coast. All right, I'll give you some stuff about the Gold Coast a little bit later on, but we are in southeast Queensland, Brisbane in particular. Let's have a look at this beautiful part of Australia. It's live in Queensland, certainly live out on the roads. The elite women still making their way, and you can see a little bit of action here as well. Much faster section of the course for the women. But it's Team Bridge Lane that just seem to be muscling the front of the peloton at the moment and neutralising any of these moves.
Yeah, Team Bridge Lane marking the front really well. Team ARA, DRG, Knights. I think you can see Ruth Corset there on the front on the right, her fluorescent yellow helmet. It's quite easy to point out.
And she was third yesterday in the Oceania Road Race Championship. She's 45 years of old, former Australian road champion, former winner of the National Road Series as well. She is an evergreen, but at 45, still, and I'm sure she's disappointed that the women are not racing up Mount Coot-tha, because she is still in the top 1, 2, 3 best climbers in Australia, for sure.
Oh, she's an absolutely unreal climber, I'll give her that. She probably wouldn't like today as much, but, you know, she got third in sprint yesterday. It was uphill, but she's been placing in crit sprints in Queensland the last few years, so you just absolutely never know. She is very smart.
She's unstoppable is what she is. And the Grand Fondo riders today, they'll be unstoppable because it's such a special for all of the riders to be out on these roads as we're seeing here for the elite women. Let's go and have another chat with one of our Grand Fondo participants.
And Scott, thank you so much, mate. We're down here on the start line. You can see there are thousands of riders all lined up behind us at the moment. And I've got Georgie on the front. So, Georgie, how do you find it?
How do I find the ride?
Yeah.
Oh, fun. Yeah, lots of fun. Lots of people, nice and fast, great atmosphere. Yeah, it's awesome.
And it's not your first time here at the Grand Fondo at the Tour de Brisbane. So, talk us through some of the highlights that you've had and what you're looking forward to out on the course today.
Some of the highlights is just the really fast tunnels when you go into the tunnels.
Yes.
They're really super fast, and that's a lot of fun. And then just getting yourself to Mount Coot-tha and in the hurt locker. It hurts.
And of course, we're getting a wind up because you're about to get underway.
Yes.
Georgie, good luck out there on the
Thank you.
ride today, and we look forward to seeing you at the finish line.
Awesome. Thank you.
The elite women just making their way to the top of another roller out along the freeway here in Brisbane. Super fast conditions for the women, which, as we said before, really hard to force breakaways to happen. But we know Courtney Sherwell, she's tried a few times, and she will be relentless. And she won't be stopping her attacks anytime soon.
No, and then we've got Mia Hayden, who's just rolled off the front there, and then the women's racing project team, it might be Stephanie Hibbert. She sat on the front of that crit on Friday night at King Street for most of the race. She's very, very strong. Still new to the sport. And she's a medicine student on the side.
Yep.
And this is some of the Grand Fondo participants of the Tour de Brisbane just rolling out now. A couple of thousand of them rolling out throughout this morning. And as we said, it's such a special occasion for them in particular, because the elite riders, while perhaps they do appreciate the fact that they are on freeways, they're racing through tunnels, but they're still focused on the racing. Whereas the Grand Fondo riders, they really get to soak it in and really truly appreciate how special it is for the Brisbane City Council and the Queensland Government to allow this kind of event to happen. And this is something that can really build over the next few years now, especially with the Olympic Games coming up in 2032. This Grand Fondo on these particular roads in the centre of Brisbane will raise so much awareness for cycling, cycle safety and health and fitness.
Yeah, and Brisbane, to be honest, most of Brisbane in the city has awesome bike paths. I can get most of the way to work from my house, 17 kilometres, without even touching a road. So for lots of these people you'll see them out on their ride to work in the morning, and the bike paths are absolutely chock-a-block. But you can see there's some kits from teams down in Victoria, so we've also got a lot of people that have come up for the weekend.
Little bit of a stretch in the women's peloton, but not really forcing the pace on the front. And those bike paths, you go along Kingsford Smith Drive, right along the river, and the River Loop, which is what a lot of the riders in the CBD go and do. So many great bike paths up here, so well planned out city, and the topography of the city not that easy to sort out. Lots of one-way streets and one-way roads around Brisbane. So if you can get onto the bike paths, they've done really well to design that part of the city as well as they have, with the topography being as challenging as it is up here.
Yeah, and honestly, I still get lost in the car through the city centre.
I'm glad you do, because I certainly do.
I ride my bike through there all the time, but yeah, as you'll see on the right-hand side of a lot of the roads, they've got a two-way bike path. That'll be just one way for the cars. You can see here we've got the Cycling Development Foundation on the front. Looks like Jennifer Davis. She raced yesterday, as did Lucy Fittis behind, who was the champion of King Street on Friday night. She's really stepped up with her sprint the last. She came from track sprint, actually, but has really stepped up her endurance, I should say, to now be a very good road sprinter.
Has Ashley Ann Kudnoff got anything to do with that transformation as well, dragging her across from track sprint perhaps? I joke, I say in jest.
Actually, no, she was an N-Swiss Sydney athlete, and then stepped across onto the road, did a few crits, and then realised that she enjoyed that.
Well, I might blame Bradley McGee then as the N-Swiss Enduro boss back in the day, perhaps. Great kit, though, the Cycling Development Foundation. When you see it up nice and close, it really is an attractive kit. Lucy in the older jersey, I think, behind, the new jersey on the front, but looking at them in the Criterium the other night, really pretty. Nice jerseys.
Really good kit. They got it designed.
More of the Grand Fondo riders rolling off the left of the screen. And good luck to them all. Hopefully everyone stays safe. You do get a few in there, of course, in the Grand Fondos that get a bit exuberant and start pushing the pace a little bit, and you've got a real mixed bag of skills when you're looking at Grand Fondo level. It's they certainly have a mixed bag in the elite races as well, but the difference is so much greater in the Grand Fondo type events. So they really do need to look out for each other and keep themselves nice and safe.
And the Grand Fondo is in age categories. So there are some people seriously racing for their age categories, and then there's also just others who just want to ride along, have some fun. Someone's got a backpack on their back there. They just want to have a fun day out, as other people are seriously trying to race to make the World Championships.
This group that's going out now looks like perhaps, because we've had a lot of groups already go out onto the road, your group, your age category, you'd be way out in front now. This one looks a little bit more like my age category, I think. I might be rolling out with this group.
Yeah, and it could potentially also be...
you're just agreeing with you. Thanks so much, Hayley.
There's a non-competitive category, so they'll roll out because they just want to ride for fun. You could do the non-competitive next year, Scott.
I don't, ask my family about that. I am very, very competitive, actually. So I would go in knowing that I'm not fit enough and I'm carrying too many kilos and I don't have a chance. But once you're out there, it's white line fever. I would try and do everything I can to go as far as I can with the leaders.
And I'm exactly the same as you. I decided in 2018 I didn't want to race professional level anymore. And I came back to Queensland to ride for fun. And the next thing I know, I'm in an NRS race.
Yeah. I recall you being thrown into the Queensland Team Pursuit team as well. Was that last year or 2 years ago at the Nationals?
It was 2 years ago first. 3 weeks before, do you want to ride the Team Pursuit? sure, let's throw the team together.
Yeah, ouch. It's a hard race to do, that's for sure. So you did really well.
It is, but I absolutely love track, and I think I might give it another bit of a go next year.
Oh, good. There you go. There we go. A comeback on the cards. Brisbane 2032. Ride for Great Britain or Australia? That would be the question for you, Hayley Jones.
Technically, to ride Road Nationals, I had to change my UCI nationality. So I am now 100% Australian, but don't spread the word too much.
This is the elite women we can see here, still as it was, status quo for them, as they are strung out, keeping the average speed up a little bit, but it's not a speed that's going to be damaging to the sprinters' legs at all. Let's just talk a little bit more about your heritage. We are chatting here with Hayley Jones. I'm Scott McGrory, and Hayley Jones beside me. Your family, your mother, Louise, let's have a bit of a chat about her, because we did mention her before. She is a commissaire on the race and one of our highest ranked international commissaires, but very Welsh and a former champion in her own right.
Yeah, she was a sprint cyclist turned road endurance rider as well. So bit of a different background. She came through sprint. She won a gold medal at the 1990 Commonwealth Games before I was born. And then when I was young, she came back and did the road race at the Kuala Lumpur Commonwealth Games. So cycling was brought up in my family, but I have a brother that no one knows about because he's just not interested. But no one ever made us do cycling. No one ever made us get involved. I just loved going down the track and riding around on my bike down at the Main D Club track, which is where some other really good cyclists came from, like Geraint Thomas, Luke Rowe, and Eleanor Barker.
Some very famous names in European cycling, not just UK cycling, but certainly on the continent of Europe in the big races. Geraint Thomas, the 2018 Tour de France champion. Let's go down and see who Joel Murray is chatting to now.
Just a good, fun ride with the boys, and we're about to go, so I'm going to enjoy it.
Right. Enjoy it, stay safe, keep it upright, mate. And there we go, Scott, the Grand Fondo. These guys, thousands of riders are out there at the moment, and you can see them rolling through. There's about 1,000 riders taking off with each of the wave groups. So, Scotty, back up to you, mate. Perfect conditions down here in Brisbane.
Now, Hayley, I think Joel would be a little bit envious. He's loving working and chatting to these Grand Fondo riders, but he did ride it last year. And he's fit. He looks really fit. You can see how lean he is. I reckon he'd really like to be out there riding the course today as well.
Oh, yeah, and it's an amazing course for the Grand Fondo. I bet he wishes he was there. I have said that I want to do the Grand Fondo once before this event is on myself. I think it would be really good. And you did see there the Moreton Bay Cycling Club. So they're another local cycling club in Brisbane, rolling away with their group of riders who wanted to go for a ride with the boys, as they said.
We know Balmoral's is a strong club here. Back in my day, growing up on the Gold Coast, Kangaroo Point, was a really strong club also. Caloundra was a strong club. Which are the bigger clubs, more prominent clubs now in this generation?
Yeah, so Kangaroo Point is still around. They're still a pretty big club. They don't, I came through Balmoral because they had a junior program. Still work with their junior program. And then also the Gold Coast Cycling Club is one of our biggest clubs now. It was two separate clubs, and a few years ago they merged into one. So there's a lot of good riders coming out of that club. Last year's NRS champions, Danny DiFrancesco and Kane Richards, both through there. So plenty of clubs in Queensland giving out good talent at the moment.
That's the Richards and DiFrancesco super couple, because they are engaged to be married, aren't they? Both now in Europe, and Danny is riding in the World Tour. Now we can see the men's race. So across to the men's race, we have a breakaway group because they have been over Mount Coot-tha, and you can see how it has split up as well, as expected, because that's such a tough climb for them. The women not doing Mount Coot-tha, just a reminder. The men, they do it twice, and we can see how it has really caused some carnage in the men's peloton.
Yeah, you can see they're going up the back now. They've just dropped down. There's a lot of TV channels, stations at the top, so it's a good spot to know how you can spot where you are on the hill.
And just see a couple of the traffic cones there, knocked over on the right-hand side. So hopefully the riders themselves didn't clip those cones and cause that to happen. Women's race, slightly different formation for them. You see all the fluoro yellow helmets towards the front of the Cycling Development Foundation. but all bunched up in the women's race. The men's race, it's really starting to blow to pieces. And you can see we did have a little bit of picture breakup for the men because of just the topography. They're up and down the hills, up around Mount Coot-tha. And while the TV stations, as you can see, you were just talking about Hayley, they've got the big towers, a bit easier for their reception, a little bit more challenging on the back of the motorbikes to get the reception. But you can see just how strung out the peloton is. Number 41, we did catch it just before, which is Damien Vesely. He was on the attack just before Mount Coot-tha, and we can see what's happened. He's been caught and now pushed right to the back of the bunch.
Yeah, but they were just did have a little gap before, but they have closed it now as they've started the descent. This road does link up a little bit here, does kick up, and then it will start rolling back down towards the actual descent. There will be good to see if any Strava KOMs go up or down here today.
Can see the National Road Series leader jersey, under 23s I think that is, but we do have one of the tandems I think that's going to be out on the Grand Fondo course down chatting with Joel. Let's go and see what they're up to.
And here we are down at the start line. I've got a great little athlete with me. This is Brodie. Now, Brodie is our state triathlon champion, also our national triathlon champion. And Brodie, you're taking on the big ride today with the Grand Fondo. Are you a bit excited about this, mate?
Yeah, I'm really excited, yeah.
And of course, Brodie, you're also a bit of a groundbreaker, one of our first ever juniors to do a triathlon at the state championship level and also at the national level as well. So how does it feel to be one of the first vision impaired junior athletes really paving the way and starting to get that happening for the multi-sport athletes?
Yeah, it feels really good, yeah. It feels amazing, yeah.
Feels amazing?
Yeah.
And of course you get to ride with Lachlan. Lachlan, talk about the pilot vehicle that you have, the tandem.
Yeah.
You're going to be taking her through. There's about 1,000 riders in front of you at the moment. So talk us through, how do you think you're going to go today?
We're just going to take it probably easier today, just try and get through the course and just get done.
And is there much communication between Brodie and yourself when you're out there riding?
A lot.
A lot of communication. Yeah. So what do you reckon, what's the number one thing you're looking forward to enjoying out there today for the Grand Fondo?
Having fun, just getting to ride.
Fantastic. So having fun, having a good ride. This is the Australian Unity Tour to Brisbane. Back up to you, Scotty.
Now, we do talk about 2032 Olympic Games, but let's not forget Paralympics as well. So blind and vision impaired athletes certainly have an opportunity to be involved in that as well. So perhaps we've just spoken to a competitor that might be around for the Paralympic Games going forward. The elite women here in the Oz Cycling Tour de Brisbane National Road Series events, second of the year. We had the Colac to Warrnambool for the women in early February, the Melbourne to Warrnambool for the men, and that was the first round of the NRS. And Sophie Edwards now leading the overall series for the women. It's Trishan Saunders for Team Bridge Lane leading for the men, and Sophie Edwards certainly is one of the riders that we've been talking a lot about because in a bunch sprint, and we saw it at the Sunshine Coast Tour last year as well, she was so strong in all of the bunch sprints, which is what we're expecting from this today. Chloe Moran, her teammate, but from the other teams, who do you think might have a chance? Lucy Phidias is one we've already mentioned as well. Is there anyone else out there, a bit of a smoky, that might be able to come over at the top?
Yeah, Keely Bennett from Bridge Lane. She's a standout new sprinter. Matilda Reynolds. All the people we've mentioned so far today, but you never know, someone else could step out that we haven't actually spoke about so far. Georgia Whitehouse, she is ARA as well. She's got a really good sprint on her. She might be on team duty. She was on the front before, which does mean that she might be on team duties.
That's a challenge, isn't it? And you can see the men's on the right-hand side as they come down Mount Coot-tha, the women out on the freeway. So two contrasting events here as they've gone up over Mount Coot-tha, down the other side. A real scramble for the men to stay safe, try and open up gaps, or if you've been dropped going up the climb, try to get themselves back on. If you're a good descender, you have the opportunity to rejoin. For the big contenders in the women's race, it's more about just being tucked in the peloton and save energy.
Yeah, and you can see the usual girls that are not on the front today. That's the big difference. You've got Izzy Carnes there on the front with Rachel Wales and Mia Hayden in third from Bridge Lane. They are typically in this race the racers that are going for the win. They are the climbers, but today they're on team duties at the front.
And, okay, I'm just going to go back to, here's another attack, and of course it comes from the pink colours, the DRG Knights. Courtney Sherwell, perhaps. She's been the most aggressive of that team. And really does want to try and do something. Now, this is actually getting a bit of a gap on the field. Each time she's attacked previously, it strung the field out, but everyone was paying enough attention to follow the wheels. She's timed this really well to get a bit of a gap, but the chase is on.
Yeah, and she did it over the little rise, so she got the gap, but now they're going down the hill, so the bunch will pick up a lot of speed. It looks like she took someone from Bridge Lane with her. It might have been Gina Ricciardo, but it's a little bit hard to tell. But the bunch is really chasing to close that gap now.
If it is Ricciardo, she's a handy one to have from a big team because she does like a breakaway. We mentioned that right at the very start. So she may commit unless there are team orders to not do that and try and keep it together for Keely Bennett. What I was going to say before, Hayley, was a rider like Georgia Whitehouse, who, when she was riding with the Sydney Uni Salmonade team, she was their designated sprinter. Now she's come across to ARA, a bigger team that has a European program, but she has several really fast sprinters in that team. So she may not get the opportunity to go for race wins that she did have when she was in one of the smaller teams previously. That's a bit of a challenge. You want to go to the best team, but then you may not get your opportunity to win.
And I think, yeah, for her that will be a bit different this year, but I think getting the opportunity to go to Europe for, I think they're going for 7 or 8 weeks, will be a really good step then into that European racing. As on some of the other teams, you will get the opportunities, but you also aren't racing in Europe.
And we just see the right-hand turn there at the bottom of Mount Coot-tha for the elite men, and gee, there has been some damage done with that climb. Was some picture breakup, so we weren't able to show you all of the climb, unfortunately, and that's of no fault of our own. It's just the reception in the area. But you can just see the damage as they've come down along to the freeway. Feed zone now for the elite men, and some challenging situations for some of these guys to try and stay in contention.
So I think that is Saul Love. He's just trying to chase back on. He's a really good climber, but descending maybe not so much. He did an Everest recently on the back of Mount Coot-tha on a Brisbane high bike, the ones you pick up in the city, and he did it to raise money for mental health. Lost one of his friends to suicide recently, and he did 40. He did tell me yesterday, and I asked, I think it was 46 Mount Coot-thas on a Brisbane hire bike.
And not an e-bike. It's not an e-bike.
Not an e-bike.
Wow.
You know the ones they used to have around the city that you just pick up on the side of the road? It was just on one of them.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Fantastic. Oh, well done. And for a great cause, and certainly commiserations to anyone that did know Saul's friend. So Saul Love, riding for the Scody Racing Balmoral Cycling Club. Gee, Balmoral's getting a few plugs here today, but it's because they're being prominent and they're doing so many good things. And look at the damage that has been done. Mount Coot-tha really has split the peloton apart. The pure sprinters are struggling, and the climbers getting some great opportunities, and there's a big chase happening to try and bring things back together. So the riders that missed out the first time over the climb now scrambling to get themselves back in contention. This is the elite women. You can see them just making their way down, and the attack from Sherwell. You were spot on. She attacked at the right time. She opened up a gap, but then immediately on the fast run on the other side of the hill, the peloton has the advantage. The bigger group, much faster bringing it back.
Yeah, and that's what happens because it's such a rolling road. There's no big ups, but there's also no big downs, but the bunch can keep rolling really fast.
Yeah, the average speed in the peloton, and so many extra fresh legs as well. So it is easy on a road like this to sit in the middle of the peloton. If you're at a National Road Series level and a really fit athlete, it really is quite easy. So it's also then easy to pop to the front, put in a big turn of pace to try and bridge a gap as well. So it makes it so hard for any of these breakaway moves to get off the front. You've got to put through so much power to try and break away from a peloton on these sorts of roads.
Yeah, and someone who is less known, first year of NRS, maybe not on an NRS team, they might give them a chance to slip away. And you've seen races before, they let them slip away, don't realise, come from another sport, really fit athlete, gone, and then you never see them again. So anything like that might be able to happen as well.
In the Under-19 Oceania Road Championships yesterday, in both men's and women's, was really interesting situation like that, without the teams and just young, youthful riders. The men, 3 riders right at the start, went on the attack, went out to over 4 minutes, and ended up, those 3 guys took the podium positions. And in the women's, it was Appleton took the win, 2 minutes and 15 seconds ahead of second place. So in the Under-19 racing, they just go. It's fantastic to watch.
Yeah, the Under-19s especially in both of them, they race so hard. They have nothing to lose. They just race hard. Even though they have teams a little bit, they're still learning how that actually works. So a lot of the time they will just be racing flat out the whole entire time, and their races are quite short because they have limits until you get to an elite. So they can't race as far as the elites usually, but they do often race as far in these races, but these races are a little bit shorter, the NRS.
While we're looking at the women coming down the road here, can us talk a little bit about that, Hayley, just with teams. Now, obviously, National Road Series level, it's teams racing. The Oceania Championships, everyone was entered as individuals, but of course, they're going to combine as their teams to help, the best riders from in their squads. I've always had the theory that as you go down the levels, as we see the split between the men on the right, the women on the left, and the men look as if they have started to bunch back together again. As you go down from International Road Series level, maybe to state racing team level, but once you get into club level racing, that's where I think that even if your teammates in a club doing a club race and you are in a National Road Series team together, I think you should still race against each other at club level, because there are so many individuals down at that lower grade, and any teams riding together at that level, for me, I think is a real unfair advantage.
Yeah, so we'll find that usually at like the club races, the Scody team that I'm running this year with the girls, we'll just race each other, have some fun, nothing serious. Then we've got the Queensland series where you'll race as a team because it is a team series as well. And then we'll do some NRS racing, which will be all teamwork.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's admirable. That's the way it should be. So here we see the men now. And it is all strung out, but that is not the full-size peloton, that's for sure. So a lot of riders have gone missing over the top of Mount Coot-tha, but this is still, considering how steep that climb is, it's still a pretty big bunch at the front of this race. These are all the riders that are strong enough to get over the top of the climb, and with all the cars behind, that's an indication that there are some big gaps behind this group. So a lot of riders have been dropped over the top of the climb as expected, but still plenty in contention.
Yeah, and you can see their tandem on the front with a few ARA riders behind, but you can't really see any riders in the car. We did have a good view then a second ago. So it would say that the gaps did really open up, and it would be hard over the top of Mount Coot-tha if you're not close to the back of the bunch. All of a sudden, they're gone.
Ryan Thomas is the team manager for the Tandem Co team, but he raced the King Street Kick-It Criterium, sponsored by LA, on Friday night, and finished second. And he hasn't been training much. He actually said that he just got pipped in the finish by Tom Chester. The two of them were away, and Tom pipped him at the end. But there was a freewheeling of the pedals just in the last couple of metres because Ryan said that he cramped in the sprint. That's not why Tom won. Tom was definitely coming at him. But he did cramp because he hasn't been training so much. He'd be happy to be back in the team car now, directing his team.
Yeah, and as a long-time rider himself, Ryan, he has some incredible bike skills. So a course like that suits him down to the ground. He can use those corners. And once the gap opens on that course, it's really hard for anyone to come back.
A couple of young riders there for ARA Skip Capital, swapping off on the front. Will Eves is the first rider that's dropped back behind, the young Tasmanian from Burnie. Rode the Under-19 World Championships in Wollongong last year. So what a fantastic experience for not just all of the riders, but in particular the Under-19s to have a home World Championships. That is so inspiring for these riders to really take up the sport and push forward.
Yeah, and for their families and all their relatives to be able to go and watch them, which usually if you go to a World Championships and it's in Europe, maybe mum and dad can come, but that's probably about it. Yep. But you did see their ARA are riding on the front. They had Tyler Tompkinson and Lockie Miller also there, all rolling through. So they probably don't want anyone to try and come back before getting to the next climb.
Tompkinson picked up a couple of gold medals in the Track National Championships a couple of weeks ago. Queenslander, so he's another young rider to look out for. Tyler Tompkinson, remember that name, really was strong a couple of weeks ago.
We did just get away from Rachel Wales to the camera, so I will give her a plug there because she's earned it. She gave a wave.
Yeah. G'day, Rach. Good morning. I hope she's enjoying it out there. It's a beautiful day here in Brisbane. We're at the showgrounds just north of the CBD, and it's a bustling environment here. Such a vibe with all the Grand Fondo riders that have already gone out on course. There's a couple of thousand out there on the road now, but still so many people, lots of kids and families are here behind us at the moment. So it's really encouraging. It's a fantastic atmosphere.
Yeah, well, there is multiple different rides. There's the NRS race, obviously, with the men and women, and then the 110k Grand Fondo, and then an 80k, which doesn't go up Mount Coot-tha. And then it goes all the way down to a community family ride, which is a free ride that people can come, bring their kids. It's about 8 kilometres around the bypass of Brisbane.
Yeah, we mentioned it before, as we see the men on the right, the women on the left. And the men had been over Mount Coot-tha. The women, they stay on the flat roads. So 2 very contrasting events here, with the challenge of Mount Coot-tha for the men and the scramble thereafter to get towards the finish and see what sprinters may still be in the bunch. Whereas for the women, it really is a big bunch sprint is what we're expecting. But we'll see how we go. Blake Agneletto from ARA signalling for the team car. I'm not sure who's the DS for the ARA squad. They've got so many good riders, talented ex-professionals, Matt Wilson, Ben Kirsten, Henk Vogels, plenty of people to call on in the team car for advice and experience. But we're talking about the juniors before. Will Eves was the one that I mentioned, and how good it was for the Aussies last year to have the Wollongong World Championships. You were former world champion in the under-19s 10 years ago, I think you said that was, in the team pursuit. Where was that?
That was in Glasgow, so it was a home one for the British team.
Great for you, yeah. So that was a good experience, but for all the Aussies, had to go all the way over there. For me, my junior world championships were in Casablanca in Morocco. I don't remember the last few days because I crashed in the road race and split my head open, but that was a big challenge. No parents were going that far back in those days to go over and watch us. Fantastic experience nonetheless.
Yeah, and you can see the women have really picked up some speed down the highway again now. Still rolling as one group. Cycling Development Foundation just taking it on the front.
And across over to now the elite men. So both races riding simultaneously, and now of course the Grand Fondo riders are out there as well. So we did mention, you said, Hayley, that the Grand Fondo, the long one, does go over Mount Coot-tha, but that's towards the end of their ride, which makes sure that they are separated from the NRS men that have gone over the climb twice. But that's just to make sure that there is no overlap. That would be quite confusing if the Grand Fondo was going over at around the same time, of course, as the elite men. But what a great experience. The Fondo itself, 110Ks, the elite men's race, 102. So it's the Fondo riders that get an extra 8Ks for nothing.
It is. However, they only have to race today. As a lot of the men have done the track nationals 2 weeks ago, last weekend Oceania Champs, time trial, road race, and now they're on their final road race before. A lot of them have, and men and women from interstate, have been in Brisbane for 3 weeks for this event. So it's a big commitment for the riders, the teams, and then obviously the state academies that a lot of them do track with.
Absolutely. Great training effect as well, though, with all of that. So the fitness that they need to be fit to be competitive here, but the training effect and the actual fitness increase that they'll get from this block of racing and training in between will be fantastic for the next events coming up.
Yeah, and with a lot of them heading off to Europe, it'll be a really good starting point.
ARA Skip Capital forcing the pace on the front of the men's peloton, but the Grand Fondo continues, riders rolling out, and Joel Murray is with another one.
And here we are down at the finish line for the duathlon as part of the Brisbane Cycling Festival. So we've got the boys here from Bundaberg, Chris and Ben Rudd. So they are both state championships in the sport of triathlon, in the swim, bike, run, and also they were both around the top 10 at the national championships not too long ago. So they've driven down to come and join us. But Ben, how was it coming down to racing us in Brisbane? It's been hot in Bundaberg, but beautiful conditions today.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. Like, that bike's just so fun, just going through the tunnels. It's a great course, like nice little hills to attack up. Yeah, had a great ride. It's just, yeah, good fun riding through there.
And of course, Chris, being part of something very big here with the Australian Unity Tour de Brisbane as well, as part of the whole festival. How have you found the experience so far?
Yeah, it's really great. I really like the ride. It's just through the city, a nice scenery, a bit something different compared to just normal Harvey Bay or Bagar or something. Just something a bit different. Yeah.
And of course, when you say different, there's a few hills out there for you guys. Bundaberg not known for its hills. How'd you take the hills today?
Yeah, pretty good. I sort of got a bit of a gap up each hill and tried to keep it on the flats. But yeah, it's pretty fast ride.
And of course, Chris, last question for you, mate. You've done the duathlon today, but will we see you teeing up for the Grand Fondo, the 80 kilometre or the 110 kilometres next year and see a real hill, Mount Coot-tha?
Yeah, think about it. Maybe next year might come time. I might give it a go, yeah.
Awesome. That's the Bundaberg boys. There's something to look for. Chris Rudd and Ben Rudd. So, Scott, back up to you in the studio.
Crud and Brud in the duathlon, so another one of the events that's happening. So many things going on here at the Brisbane Cycling Festival. Not just cycling, because duathlon, running and riding. And Jonathan Hall was former world champion, and he was, I think, 8th or 7th place in the World Time Trial Championships as a riding professional, but then made the transition across to duathlon, won the world title, and then went on to be a coach at the VIS. He was a triathlon coach. Now, I'm not sure where he's actually, Jono Hall, but yeah, he was a prominent rider within Australian cycling that was also very good at the duathlon and became an elite coach. This is the elite women and under 23 road race, still out on the course. We know that the men have been over Mount Coot-tha twice, so there has been some breaking up of the peloton, but it's a long way from the second time over Coot-tha towards the finish, so plenty of opportunity for riders to come back, and a flat course predominantly, though, for the women in comparison.
Yeah, predominantly flat and probably a bunch sprint, but we never know. They've still got a fair way to go in this race. You can see the climbers on the front really just keeping the pace on, not too hard, but letting their sprinters not have to touch the front.
And the peloton strung out in the men's race. Very much a reduced peloton after those two ascents of Mount Coot-tha. But still a lot of riders there, it must be said. Brady Gilmore, there's been a lot of talk about him from the ARA Skip Capital team, and it's his teammates that are right at the front of the peloton now. So the former Supercross rider, so motocross, Supercross in the USA, did a couple of seasons over there and only really started cycling during the pandemic. And he's been incredible. Almost won the Oceania road race yesterday. Just got pipped on the line by Liam Walsh from the Team Bridge Lane squad. And Brady Gilmore is a guy that you really have to keep an eye on because he's going to be someone quite special. He's still losing a bit of motocross shoulder and upper body bulk. Once that comes off, he is going to be able to get over these hills as good as anybody. And they have the skills. I love seeing Troy Herfoss is another one. I know Troy Bayliss and Shannon Johnston. There's 3 riders that have come from motor racing and road racing, not so much from motocross or supercross like Brady Gilmore, but those guys have incredible skills on the bicycle. And Herfoss races in the National Road Series. Shannon Johnston was a superstar in Victoria racing in the Criterium scene down there. And Troy Bayliss, not that he raced at an elite level in cycling, but whenever he was on the bike, because he's a keen cyclist, he is one of the most skillful people you'll see. So great to see another motorbike rider coming across into cycling in Brady Gilmore. Here's the women's peloton again, still as it has been for most of the race. Whenever Courtney Sherwell hasn't been on the attack, it has been pretty much like this, controlled peloton, which would have Sophie Edwards, the current overall National Road Series leader, also her teammate Chloe Moran, Keely Bennett from Team Bridge Lane. Those riders will be licking their lips. Lucy Phidias is the other one we've been talking about, the winner of the LA King Street Kick It Criterium on Friday night. 3 of the big sprinters that are loving the fact that no breakaways have been able to get away in the women's race.
Yeah, and you can see them now stepping back into the tunnel, which takes them basically across the whole city. And then they'll pop out on the other side and head down towards Kingswood Smith Drive. Great part of the city, absolutely beautiful along there. Follows the river and then out towards the Brisbane airport, which is very close to the city in Brisbane actually, and with the tunnels links up very well. It's really good for travelling, and if you're here on holiday, you can get straight into the city centre in about 15 minutes.
Now, it looks very dark on that camera, but it's not quite as bad as that on the bike. They can see where they are going. And we've got to hand it to the Queensland Government through Tourism and Events Queensland for their support and Brisbane Council to be able to have these road closures early on a Sunday morning. But you can imagine the disruption to some motorists that weren't quite aware of this. It's just fantastic they've been able to do it for the sport, and this will grow the awareness of health, fitness, activity. And South East Queensland is where you come to get fit. It's amazing how many people are out and about early in the morning up here. The sun, of course, up very early, so that gets everybody out of bed, and health and fitness is such a vital part of this region. It's addictive. It really is when you come up here, isn't it?
It makes such a difference with the weather here. For someone who's lived in the UK for actually over half my life and then lived in Australia for a bit of it, it's so much easier here to get out and exercise. You don't have to. You can go in the morning before work. Even in the winter, it is pretty cold, but you can do it.
You're just starting to thaw out after all those years living in Wales, after being here for a couple of years. We see number 31 there. That's Tim Cameron from the Roland Development Cycling Team. They've got a few riders in the race, one of those National Road Series teams that have been in the series for quite a number of years now. And it's great to see that they're up there in the mix. They've got a couple of guys that have gone over the top of the climb. I ride with one of the guys a fair bit as well, actually. Kobe Henderson in Bendigo made the transition from triathlon to cycling, finished in the top 10 of the Sunshine Coast NRS Tour last year. So Roland, another team that does develop some of those riders coming through from the younger ranks and from other sports. Challenge is keeping a hold of them. We mentioned that before. If you get some really good rides in for a Tandem Co or a Roland or a Butterfields team, then those big teams like ARA and Bridge Lane, they come snapping at the heels, wanting to see if they'll sign you up.
Yeah, and you'll find Tandem Co have stepped it back up to NRS this year, and they've got Ryan Thomas on board as their DS and one of their riders. So they've stepped up the team professionalism, and they're going to be at more events again, and they've got some really good riders in there, like Cam Wright, who's a former mountain bike junior world champion, and then Damien Vesley, who's been getting around at the front of this race. So they've definitely got some good NRS level competitors in their team.
We saw Cohen Jessen there from the Geelong Cycling Club, and the riders with the 300 numbers, he's one of them, they're the under-19s. So if you see a number in the 300s, that's the under-19 riders that are in there up against the elite riders. So they've gone over the top of the climb a couple of times, and there are still a few of these under-19s that are in that group. So it's great to see the young guys going well.
Yeah, and you'll find the young guys, they can especially climb, a lot of them. They're still quite light and they have really good power. And then you can see at the back there's a local Cobra 9 rider. They're another local Queensland team that they're stepping into doing some NRS while the races are up here. I think it might be Ren Baosen. He actually went to the Under-23 World Championships for Malaysia last year. So he is another really great rider out of Brisbane, hailing from Malaysia originally.
Cobra 9, Lee Surveyors, represented here in the National Road Series in the red and white colours. So good to see all these new sponsors and names coming through. The community ride on the left-hand side. So we've got the Elite National Road Series peloton on the right and the community ride on the left. So perhaps future National Road Series competitors with the family members, and you see all the kids just about to go out on their community ride. And I think that was Kip Kaufman just walking across, the General Manager of Sport for Oz Cycling, the man that is the glue that holds all the events together for Oz Cycling. And perhaps we've got a few more Oz Cycling members that are about to sign up after this community ride. Hopefully, the more members we can get, the more powerful of an organisation we can become. And that goes across everything. It's not just membership fees that obviously help the organisation, but if we had several 100,000 members, 500,000 members, then you can go to the insurance companies with some real power and clout to actually help get a much better premiums, bring insurance down, get better benefits for the riders. So there are so many reasons to become members of Oz Cycling.
Yeah, and for those kids there that are about to go out on the community ride, there's plenty of clubs in Brisbane that do junior programs. You've also got Hamilton Wheelers who have some men in this race. There was one on the back before of the group we were watching, so they are still in the race. And you've also got the Life Cycle Cycling Club all bringing through junior programs now, and the University of Queensland Cycling Club. So signing up those kids could be super important We do have one of the cash riders here in second wheel. He is on a BMC gravel bike. That is the new BMC gravel bike. I just got one myself. Absolutely beautiful to ride. But to be honest, they're pretty much just a road bike now.
I would imagine he hasn't got gravel tyres on, though. I think that was Brendan Davids, the South African we spoke about earlier.
Yeah, I would imagine
he's got
got
catch the number, but I think it was
road tyres on. But those bikes do come with Zip 303 wheels in C.
Yeah.
So you can put them with essentially just 28 or wider road tyres on.
Mm-hmm.
You've essentially got a road bike and a gravel bike in one.
The women's peloton going through the tunnel once again. You might be able to... This is sort of question without notice, but I know that Tasman Nankervis, so multiple top 5 finisher at the Australian Mountain Bike Championships, he's off to America soon to do that new series they have, the gravel and mountain bike series that they've got over there. Big time, big money, big television coverage. It's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. Now, he's sponsored by Merida in Australia on the mountain bike, but he can't ride, or he's not allowed to ride Merida in the gravel races in America. He's gone onto a BMC. And there's something to do with Merida not being able to brand or something in America. So you might know a little bit more about that. I'm not sure. I don't quite understand why he has to ride.
Merida doesn't exist in America, technically.
There you go.
So BMC, they're all under the same company in Australia. That is my day job, actually. So I've just been thrown into that one. So that would be why, he'll be on a BMC then. They're under the same company, but different brands, usually different sponsorships, but it can all be reframed when needed.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I saw him, getting the BMC deal sorted out, then found out that it was because he can't ride the Merida in the US, and that's it's obviously the industry behind the scenes. Merida is not a bike that parent company brands and promotes in the US, but it is a rest around the world, and it's a huge company. They make a lot of bikes for other companies as well.
Yeah, they do. They work with Specialized a lot and a couple of the other big brands, but yeah, they're just not a company in America at the moment. Hopefully one day they will bridge into the US, but they're not there yet.
And someone out there might be able to inform me of this, if it's correct or incorrect, but as we see the men's peloton really under a bit of pressure here. So the riders at the back, it's all strung out, so the pace is on, but it's not for anything other than to try and stop sprinters to get back on, I think, because it's not an attack, or it doesn't appear that they're chasing anything. It's just a nice, good, solid speed in the men's peloton. The Merida versus Specialized situation, that's my understanding is why Merida is not branded in the US, because of the deal or an arrangement they have with Specialized over there. I'm not sure if you're allowed to talk about this, but it's always been my understanding as to why Merida is not a known company in the States.
And I'm not actually 100% sure. That would make sense. I'm not 100% sure as to why. We do occasionally get the person who shoots us an email because they can't find a part for their bike while they're in America. I think they bought it overseas or something like that. But other than that, it's not really. I'm not 100% sure, so I'm not going to spread false information. I can tell you that much.
Oh, I'm quite happy to. That's all right. Leave that to me. Pace certainly on, and that's the bike that started the conversation just back there, the green Caish Park-Up colours, and I think it was Brendan Davids on that BMC gravel bike, but with obviously the road wheels to make sure he's nice and fast. And it's still ARA Skip Capital that is leading the peloton. Butterfield's third position. And coming back into view, the green colours. Caish, now, is this an actual attack, or is this to go off the front to get maybe a toilet stop? It does look like it's a fair income attack here. So let's see what ARA do about this one.
Looks like Will Holmes is just happy to sit on the front, making the pace. Good tempo, but not too tough, just trying to stop those sprinters from rolling back, because ARA do have a big contingent of their team still in that front group. So for them, it's perfect at the moment.
Well, Tristan Saunders is the National Road Series overall leader after that first round, the Melbourne to Warrnambool. He rides for Team Bridge Lane. And Liam Walsh is the winner of yesterday's Oceania Road Race Championship in a very powerful bunch sprint, and the former track specialist has made a good transition across to the road in these last couple of seasons. Still very strong on the track also. And question answered, it was definitely a breakaway. I just wasn't sure. Sometimes you see riders will pop off the front to go and do a toilet stop. Now, awkward place to do it if he was going to, because he's on a freeway. There's no trees to go and run behind. But this is a fair dinkum attack now, so it's good to see that they are not going to just let ARA take them all the way to the finish, and they want to try to mix this one up.
Yeah, and they're about to go back into the tunnel, so they'll be back through the tunnel soon. So if you can get through there and out of sight, you might actually stay away for a while. It is hard on this course because you're very straight.
And we can see some more riders. And the Grand Fondo section, we saw the community ride that popped up before going off the front, and you can see all the kids all excited, getting themselves ready. You just don't know. Events like this, you have no idea at this stage how many of these kids go on to do something within the sport. This could be the catalyst that really gets them hooked in cycling. And if they do, perhaps they might put their helmets on correctly and just make sure it's over the top of their forehead in case they do fall off. And we can see lots of examples of that with the kids, unfortunately, not putting their helmets on quite right. But they will get that sorted in future. So great to see the kids out there having fun and enjoying it. Into the tunnel again. Fast section of the course. And pretty sure that rider off the front was Alex Heaney from New Zealand, if my eyes didn't deceive me. And we go back to the women's race. Hayley Jones, there's an attack. And it's the pink colours yet again.
It is the pink colours. Can't see who it exactly is right now. I can tell Cassia Bogliero Park, she's got the fluorescent green Cannondale. So she's easy, but the rest of them from this distance still all look quite similar, but they've really strung out the bunch. It's probably the first time we've seen the bunch be this strung out as they're going down, off and onto Kingsford Smith Drive.
The pink colours of DRG Knights, formerly Knights of Suburbia. And that really did start more as just a bit of a riding bunch organisation. They do great things down there. Really good, inspiring group of people.
Yeah, and a lot of charity work for mental health as well around their Knights of Suburbia. Yeah. So doing some great things down in Victoria. They've brought it up to Queensland. They've got a local ride on the Gold Coast.
I'll have to join that. Yeah.
Every Sunday morning now. Yeah. So they are starting to spread around the country as well.
Yeah, good to see them aggressive here as well. They know that they're up against it because the big teams of the National Road Series have pure sprinters, and they are trying to shut this race down, trying to strangle the peloton into forcing a bunch sprint.
And that is Cassia Boglio attacking now. You can tell her bike. She's got a little bit of a gap, so we are going along the side of the Brisbane River now, or the brown snake as we call it here in Brisbane. Because it does look like a brown snake.
Yeah, it does. Its belly does swell every now and then, every couple of years when it floods up here, unfortunately.
This is one of the main roads in and out of Brisbane, so it is good. They've closed one side, but they've left the other side open, so traffic can still get down there for the day. But Cassia's opened up a bit of a gap, just trying to get the motorbike away from her because she's moving too fast currently.
And she'd be desperately trying to get into the slipstream of that motorbike for just a little bit longer to perhaps maybe open up the gap. Now, this is better from the DRG Knights because earlier on it was Courtney Sherwell that put in 2 or 3 attacks, but then no counter-attacks from her teammates. This has been a couple of moves now from the ladies in pink to really make sure that the counter-attacks have a better chance of going away. So it's made it much harder to chase down. I find it interesting to see who it is that's actually chasing, because you would think that ARA Skip Capital would be the team that should be forced into chasing these moves down because of their dominant sprinters, but that's not necessarily the case. So it's a free ride for most of the ARA squad because it only took one rider to close that one down. This is where they need another attack to really put some pressure on those teams that are trying to stop this from being a breakaway.
Yeah, and you really do need a good number of team riders that are willing to go for the attacks to be able to do the counters. You can't just rely on 1 or 2 people, or you do end up just burning them, and then you've got nothing to work with. It's hard in these races because they are mostly teams of 5, 6. They're not massive teams. Yep. So having enough riders, but DRG Knights have gone for the counter attack again, but it does look like someone's glued hard on the wheel there from potentially the Butterfields team. But they are sticking on the wheel there. They don't want to give up anything.
Timing on that particular attack not as great as what we have seen from the Knights for the last couple of moves. just launching from sort of third wheel, just dragged riders with them, so it hasn't really opened up any gap whatsoever. But they're going to keep trying, so I like it. It's admirable. Good on the Knights for having a real crack.
It's quite narrow here, so you can't just send it across to the other side of the road to try and move away from people. They are just going to jump straight into your slipstream.
We saw the men on the right there. They're heading through the tunnel. The women out there on the main roads now around Brisbane. And if you are up here, if you haven't been to Brisbane with a bike before, make sure you bring one or hire one. Get one of the town bikes. Maybe don't do Mount Coot-tha. How many times was it?
Twice.
No, the
40-something.
40-something. You don't have to do that. You can if you want. But get out onto the bike paths, right along the river. It's such a great way of seeing the city. And unlike some of the bike paths that I have ridden that are quite hectic, everyone is aware of the cycling element up here. So pedestrians or joggers, they all understand that there are lots of cyclists at reasonable speeds, so they do keep to the left. It's one of the safest places on a bike path that I've ridden in Australia, compared to, say, Beach Road or Beaconsfield Parade in Melbourne, where it can be so hectic with dogs and walkers and skaters and everything. Brisbane really does it well.
Yeah, and most paths do have a path for riding and for walking. Scooters are becoming the new fun thing to try and navigate around, but...
A very diplomatic way of saying they are a menace.
But, yeah, we've got Rachel Wales back on the front. She's just happy to sit there. I think Emily Watts from Bridge Lane, Cassia Boglio from DRG Knights. They're a newer team. I think it's their third season, but they've really stepped into the top ranks of the NRS over the last couple of years.
And they developed Georgie Howe, who's now riding for the Jayco Alula World Tour team. She came from rowing. I think she was at Princeton rowing team, part of Australian rowing team as well. Came across to cycling, worked really well with Nick Owen in particular, the former VIS sports scientist and coach. And within a season of National Road Series, got herself a contract in the World Tour. So well done to Georgie and also to the team itself, the DRG Knights, for developing another rider through the non-traditional way of coming through a national track program, which is kind of the way most of our pros got developed previously. NRS men have gone through the tunnel, popped out the other side, and a significant change has happened. We've got a group off the front. So this is really intriguing now for the men. They've gone over Mount Coot-tha twice, but it's on the flat roads that we've seen a group of 4 riders get off the front of the peloton. Bridge Lane and ARA, Skip Capital represented, and not a lot of coordination here. So this is going to be challenging. They've got a nice gap over the field, but if they want to keep it that way, they're going to have to work together.
Yeah, no one wants to roll from the front to the back. They're kind of rolling over the top of each other, and then as they roll off, no one quite wants to go through. Does look like we've got a tandem rider on the front.
I think it might have been Brady Gilmore from ARA at the back of the group. We'll have another look in just a moment. And so we've got the move off the front of the men's peloton. Women's peloton, we're just waiting for the next DRG Knights attack in pink. They have been the only team really willing to have a crack when it comes to trying to get away from the field. Now, they are forced to do so. And, of course, commentators curse as soon as I say that. It's a non-pink rider that's gone on the attack. But they don't have a designated sprinter, so they are forced into doing these moves. This is good for them, though, as well, because the more teams that start getting aggressive, the better chance for some of these moves have of sticking.
Yeah, and that looks like one of the New Zealand local team kits, actually. Not sure who it is yet. Hopefully we can get a look at their number and have a good... But she was off the front a little while ago, so she also doesn't want it to come to a bunch sprint, I would suggest.
That's good.
They are stepping up now, and they're about to go on to...
Let's go and have a chat with Joel Murray once again.
Representing from Canberra, what brought you up here to Brisbane?
We've got family up here, mate, so we just came up for the race, want to go across the Story Bridge, so yeah, we're keen.
Good way to do it as well. Across the Story Bridge is the icon of Brisbane, and as a community, it's a great little vibe around here. The kids are ringing the bells already. What are you expecting to see out there, Millie?
Lots of people, fun, happy smiles.
And of course, getting out of Canberra, it's probably about 2 degrees down there at the moment. The Raiders aren't going so well in the rugby league. It'd be time to get up here. The Broncos are doing well. The locals are doing well. Brisbane's the place to be. So, Fraser, what is the big draw card to come up and join into the action with the Australian Unity Tour de Brisbane?
Look, it's above 0 degrees at the moment in Brisbane, so that's enough for us. Yeah, it's nice and warm. It's beautiful.
Women's peloton heading over the higher bridge here. So we can just see spread across the road. In the men's race, of course, we do have that group of 4 off the front. Haven't got a time gap just yet, so we'll see if that's going to last or not. But for now, the women's race, going to the script, which most of us thought was going to happen, which was a bunch sprint perhaps at the end. But we do have several teams now that have started doing some attacks. And again, another one now. So this is really good to see. Some more animation in the women's race, more attacks coming. Hayley Jones, I think they need to not have as many pauses between these attacks, if of course they can, because the more attacks that happen, the more fatigue you put into the chasing riders, the more chance you have of snapping the elastic and actually getting off the front of the group. This is looking pretty good though. Fast part of the course, and it is starting to stretch them.
Yeah, and it looks like it's Stephanie Hibbert from the Women's Racing Project. She's also from Bendigo, or hails in Bendigo now to go to uni because she's a medical student. She did a few races with us last year. So she's stepped into an NRS team now, and she really gave it a good crack on Friday night. But they are riding down the main highway of Brisbane at the moment, and the main Queensland highway, so they're definitely blocking some traffic this morning.
Absolutely. Alternate routes, and lucky for GPS these days, because back in the day it would have been get the book out of the back or out of the glove box and get all the map out and try and work out how you're going to get around all the road closures. And only a few more hours of that, though, here in Brisbane, because the Grand Fondo riders are out on course as well. 108 kilometres they had, or have, to navigate. Is the longest of the Grand Fondos. Multiple options for that. For the elite men in the National Road Series here, it's 102 kilometres. It's 81 Ks for the women. High average speed for the women, though, on the flat roads.
Yeah, and they only have about 15 kilometres to go, from what I can see. So that we are coming into the closing stages of this race, so people really don't want to leave it to a sprint now. They are starting to get the moves going.
Joel Murray's loving chatting to the Grand Fondo participants. Who you got with you now, Joel?
You've come to Brisbane. Beautiful day today. Couldn't get much better, could it?
Yeah, it's beautiful today. Yeah, it's nice and windy, so it's like, relaxing. It's cool.
And cool yourselves down. So when you're going across the Story Bridge, what are some of the icons you're looking forward to on the community ride this morning?
I'm not actually sure, to be honest. No, I like the wheel and like looking at the river. It's just that's pretty. The view.
That Brisbane River is definitely a draw card. And last thing, ladies, the community ride, it's all fundraising for the common good, so that is the charity.
Yeah.
So is that a bit of a draw card to come and support us this morning?
Yeah, it's really good to like, support the charities. Yeah, it's a good cause. Yeah, and get everyone together, so it's fun and yeah, good.
Awesome, girls. Good luck out there. Have a great ride and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Back up to you.
Fun-loving riders heading out on the Grand Fondo, the community ride. And lots of different options to be had. The 108 kilometres is the longest. And back into the elite racing now. So this is the Oz Cycling Tour de Brisbane, second round of the National Road Series. And both overall leaders are here racing in the women. It's Sophie Edwards. She won the Colac to Warrnambool. And Tristan Saunders riding for Team Bridge Lane. He won the men's Melbourne to Warrnambool, so he is the overall leader of the National Road Series. Sophie Edwards, of course, we've mentioned already several times, ARA Skip Capital team. An attack off the front, Tandem Co. We've spoken about them a couple of times. Now we talk up ARA, we talk up Team Bridge Lane because they've been so dominant. Great to see another team like Tandem Co. having a real go.
So it is local Max Campbell. He's come from rowing, so he's a bit of a Georgie Howe. Very, very strong.
Good man off the front.
Only young. I think he was 21 last year, so he's super young, super fresh to the sport. And he did, correct me if my memory is wrong, but I think he was third at Grafton or fourth at Grafton last year in his first ever NRS race. Second NRS race after Tour de Brisbane, sorry.
Not a bad effort.
So he's really gearing up for that in a few weeks. He's been out doing the big Ks. Coming from strength to strength, so I think moving into the next couple of years, he's definitely going to be a name to watch.
Well, that's a fantastic introduction to the National Road Series to get a performance like that. We spoke about the Melbourne to Warrnambool being one of the oldest races on the planet, but in terms of the most difficult one-day races in Australia for the National Road Series, it's the Grafton to Inverell. It's not as far as the Melbourne to Warrnambool, 230 Ks versus 265 or so for the Warnie, but the terrain means it's a much more difficult race. So for a rider to come into the Grafton to Inverell as his second NRS race and get a big result, that just huge kudos to him. It shows how much potential and how big his engine is.
Yeah, I think we'll see some really big results over the next couple of years. He's really committed to the sport. He's off by himself now on the front, and they are about to get onto the highway as well. But he does have some company coming up behind with a rider from NCMG.
Team sponsors based out of northern Central Coast of New South Wales. So great to see them up there. Now I know, I didn't get a quick look at the number there, but I know Josh Cranage, the under-19 Australian road champion, he rides for, well, he was riding for one of those teams, I think. I'm not sure if he is this year. Criterium Racing he's with this year.
Yeah, and sorry, correct me, they are Criterium Racing this year. Last year they were NCMG, this year they are Criterium Racing. They are the same team, but they've got some new sponsors.
So that may be the youngster. He's heading off, Josh Cranage, the under-19 Aussie road champion. He is actually heading off to Belgium and Europe this year to do a stint of racing. And our Oz Cycling High Performance Program has also got some events for all the under-19s planned. So they are going to have some riders that are over there, bring them together and do some under-19 races together as a national squad. So that's really good. Something we haven't done for, I'm not even sure if we've ever done it with the under-19. So great to see that that is something that's going to be happening this season.
Yeah, they did go last year again with just for a small little trip, just a few weeks for a group of the under-19s. But it is good if you can get over there for a 7 or 8 week stint. You can get a dip into it through your school holidays, but then also come back to race the rest of the season in Oz. But we do have another attack from the Women's Racing Project team. Looks like it might be Stephanie Hibbert again. She's decided she's going to give it something before the finish because they don't actually have a sprinter in their team at the moment in this race, so they do want to try and break it up before that point.
Yeah, it was Josh Cranage, so confirmation in the men's race there in the fluoro colours of Criterion Racing that's jumped across. So the elite men's road race, you've got an under-19 Australian road champion that's gone out in front with a former rower. That's great. New names, new faces, and they're not intimidated or scared by the bigger teams of the NRS.
Yeah, and you can see with the women now, it's come back together. They're just going back down the highway. So they've gone out and now they've turned around and they're coming back. They've just passed underneath the road to the airport, so they are very close to the airport. We have closed the highway next to the airport for this, and that just shows you how big of an event this actually is in Queensland. We have got the Women's Racing Project on the front. They got a new kit this year, and then you can see behind ARA also got a new kit this year, and when you see them on the camera they do look quite similar. Women's Racing Project's definitely a lot more in the pink colour though. It is Stephanie Hibbert rolling off. She's just done 2 big attacks, and she probably is trying to look at her teammates now and see, is anyone going to help me, because she can't just do it by herself. No one too keen in the women's race now to attack. They're just all rolling along. I think a few of them might have thought, it's too late, we're not going to do anything.
And the closer you get to the finish, the more the sprinters start thinking about saving their energy as well. But that's not the case in the men's race, because 4 riders off the front now. None of them from the big teams that we've been mentioning a lot. But that's good, the combination. It'll be us against them. And for now, it looks like they're working really well together. That's Cranage in the yellow colours, the under-19 Australian junior champ. So it's good to see the youngster up there. Shout out to his father, Jamie Cranage. I used to ride with him in South Australia many, many years ago.
Yeah, and then we've got Blackshaw Racing in there also with Andy Sampson. He's an under-23. He's raced all this week too, and Damien Vesley from Tandem. So Tandem have actually got 2 people in this breakaway currently. And we did just see before the women went past on the other side of the road, so the men are chasing the women down now as well. So hopefully they do make it to the finish line before the men. They should. They probably got about 3 kilometres between them. The men have 15 kilometres to go at this point, and the women have about 8 kilometres to go. So they're really getting close to the finish now.
So there we have men's race on the left, women's race on the right, and 4 riders out in front, breakaway group for the elite men. Several attacks in the women's race, but none of them have been able to get these sorts of gaps that we're seeing in the men's race. It's the DRG Knights pink team that have been the most dominant in terms of attacking in the women's race, but it does look like it's going to come down to that bunch sprint that we were all predicting. Perhaps, though, Hayley Jones, there could be the chance within the last kilometre or so to do a last-minute attack if you are strong enough. But for now, it's the men, 4 riders off the front, that are really forcing the pace. And with the motorbike sitting in behind them, at least that gives us the indication that the peloton is not that close behind.
Yeah, there must be a big enough gap that the motorbike is sitting in there. You did see Max Campbell just roll a turn. He did try to skip a turn before. He does have a teammate in there. So this is when you know, teams will start to question up there, try and keep one of them more fresh. I'd say it would be Max for the end of this. However, the other 2 riders, will they agree? Will they want them to roll through, or will they try and make both riders roll through?
Can't afford to play around just yet. I think 4 riders off in front. You think of the strength that's back in the team, in the peloton. Team Bridge Lane, Tristan Saunders, the National Road Series overall leader, and then ARA have a bunch of sprinters in there as well. Blake Agnoletto, one that certainly would be up for a bunch kick if it comes down to it. So they'll be trying to chase this group back down. So the 4 out in front of the men's race on the left, they need to work really hard together. Women's race on the right, they are already focusing as a group towards that bunch sprint at the end, and they are playing into the hands of the current NRS overall series leader, Sophie Edwards. If it doesn't work out for Sophie, they have Chloe Moran to back things up. But I would think, in terms of points for the overall NRS, the National Road Series, they need to try and set Sophie Edwards up. She won the title yesterday, the Oceania Road Race. So maybe you think a bit of fairness, perhaps give Chloe Moran a go today. But if you're talking overall points, it makes sense just to go for Sophie Edwards.
I think if it wasn't an NRS race today, it would be share the love. We've got great sprinters. We've got Georgie Whitehouse, Alicia Wells, whole team of sprinters. Everyone can have a go. But she's leading the NRS, so I think, you know, they will want to put as many points between their riders and the other riders as they can going into the next round at Grafton. So we did just see Stephanie Hibbert roll off the front. She's done a big turn on the front there. She doesn't have any teammates near her though, so at this point she's probably just burning her own energy being on the front because she hasn't actually got anyone there to be near her, supporting her. They have just done a U-turn on the highway before they go back down towards the finish, so they've got less than 10 kilometres to go at this point.
So, and that's going to go very quickly as well. The roads, the speed, even though the attacks haven't been that prominent in the women's race, just these big wide roads, the average speed of the peloton is still pretty high. They are humming along, and the final 10Ks is going to go by very quickly. We know that's going to be the case in the men's race because the pace is absolutely on fire with those 4 riders combining well off the front.
Yeah, and the last bit into the finish is quite technical. It's a right-hand turn and then about 200 metres to the finish. So if you can get around that corner first with one teammate in front of you, you're going to get launched to a very, very good sprint. However, if you're stuck in 10th wheel, it's gone. It's too late.
Forget about it. Certainly got the women's field strung out now, though.
It is, and we still have Stephanie Hibbert on the front. Not sure to call her Steph or Stephanie on the TV.
No, Steph's, well, full name first, then you can refer to the short one afterwards.
We do call her Steph.
Yeah.
She did a bit of racing with us last year, but she is pretty new to the sport as well. She comes from a cycling family, but said she wasn't really interested when she was younger. Only when she went off to uni, so...
Certainly interested now on the front. And on the front of the men's race on the left, so still our group of 4 off the front. So they are working extremely well together to be able to maintain this type of lead over the main field.
Yeah, and it is Andy Sampson rolling off with Damien Vesley coming through. They're trying to keep the pressure on. It's hard to see on the live stream actually how fast they're going. They'd be rolling along here at 50 kilometres an hour, I'd say.
Cranage in the yellow colours, the youngster, under 19, riding above his age, that's for sure. So a good pick up from the Criterium racing team to get the youngster before he does head off to Europe. And I know from his father, Jamie, that last year they did contact most of, if not all of the NRS teams to gauge the interest, and they hadn't seen a lot of Josh Cranage. So there wasn't that much interest. And then he popped up and won the Under-19 Road Race Championship of Australia this year, second in the time trial as well. And all of a sudden, everybody started to take notice. So good to see Criterium picking him up.
Yeah, and these 4 are working really well together now.
Well, it's
three
now
of them.
three.
There's 3 of them now, actually, I've just noticed. Oh, no, there he is. Max has decided he's not going to work. The other 3 have kept working. They are at an advantage tandem with the 2 riders, but it could also backfire if everyone else decides not to work also.
Got to be really careful about that. Like, is he genuinely trying to save his legs, or is he struggling a little bit? And he has come through this time, Max Campbell. If they need to keep the cohesion, it's so easy to upset the apple cart out in front if you start sitting on too soon.
Yeah, and they've only got about 12 kilometres to go, so it looks like they do have a good gap. We don't have a confirmed gap at this point, but it looks like they've got a pretty good gap, and they are going down the highway pretty fast. The thing with the highway there is it is quite twisty and turny, so once you're about a minute in front, you're going to be out of sight.
That was it to the advantage of the breakaway group of 4, if that's the case. Windy roads, always nice and handy if you're off the front trying to hide from the peloton. It's one big peloton in the women's race, though. Hibbert again on the front. She's been on the front now for the last 5 or 6 kilometres.
Yeah, she has. She's keeping the pace on. They do have one rider in their team who's got a pretty handy sprint on her, so she'll be trying to line up for the sprint at the end. She has stepped up to NRS level this year, so she probably hasn't had the opportunity to race against other NRS sprinters yet, but you never know. You can see there a bunch of the men going the other way, so...
Yeah, that looks. I think it might have been part of the Grand Fondo group that's heading out the other side. There's no team vehicles behind, so I think, and you can see some more coming through. So I think that is the Grand Fondo riders out on the course. So good for them as well, not just to ride on closed roads in Brisbane, which is truly sensational, but to see the National Road Series event on the other side of the road.
Yeah, and you can essentially watch it as you're going through. They're getting to ride on the highways they'd normally be driving their cars on also, so it's very strange to think that normally you'd ride on a bike path around there, but for once you're actually riding on the road. Probably feels a lot longer too than when you're in the car.
Views of the Brisbane River, and gee, there's been some challenges, haven't they, with the floods over the last sort of decade or so that have come through here. And shout out to anybody listening that's been involved and unfortunately hit by those floods. It really had caused some carnage. But beautiful views here for the riders as they go along the Brisbane River here at the Tour de Brisbane, part of the Brisbane Cycling Festival. Thanks so much, of course, for Australian Unity for getting involved, and also the Brisbane Council, State Government, Tourism Queensland that have put all of this together. It's live in Queensland, it's spectacular, and the racing is fantastic to be watching. Showgrounds in the background of where we are at the moment as well. This will be an absolute hive of activity once all of those Grand Fondo riders come back to where they started from. So looking forward to seeing how things play out the next couple of hours after the National Road Series races themselves have finished, because they'll see so many smiling faces of all of those competitors that have been out there riding the Grand Fondo.
Yeah, it's going to get very busy in here this afternoon, and you can see now with the girls going along the river, there is a really good bike path and walking path on the right there. 5 o'clock in the afternoon onwards, one of the busiest places in Brisbane, I'd say. Everyone out for their evening run and walk and commuting home from work. And that is a relatively new road. It's probably only been there for about 5 years. So before that, you did have to ride on the road.
But it had to be a part of town planning, and that's the thing. Because it goes along the river, that was something that had years of planning for the road and then for the path to be alongside. So well done to Council for stepping up and having that separated infrastructure, which has increased the number of people that do use the paths up here in Brisbane.
Yeah, and we did just see the men. They're about to jump back onto the Kingsford Smith Drive as well. So they're not that far behind the women at the moment. There's only about 5K to go, maybe 6 or 7 for the women. So they're coming close into town. So they're almost back at the finish, but both races are going to finish within minutes of one another.
And I'm thankful to have you here, Hayley, because you do know exactly, roughly exactly where they are, so we can get an indication of that. We don't have that indication ourselves from where we are as to exactly the number of kilometres to go. And Hayley Jones being a Brisbane, what do we call people from Brisbane over here? A Brizzo. Is what we on the Gold Coast, you call you like Brizzos.
I don't know.
But that was more derogatory.
Yeah. You don't say it if you're from Brisbane, but you say it if you're saying it about someone from Brisbane.
Yeah, a Brisbaneite perhaps. Women's peloton, just a bit of a rise as they've come off the river itself. And they're not too far away from coming back here to the top of King Street at the showgrounds for the finish. And gee, what a fantastic criterium it was the other night. The LA Kick-It Street Criterium around King Street. At night, under lights, it was really spectacular. Both men and women. The elite women finished it off as well. They had the elite men before the elite women, which I do enjoy that. They really need to keep that mix of not just having the women then the men, as if the women is the precursor for the main event. That's the way the feeling is when you do that all the time. So to mix it up and have the women as the main event, or to finish with the women's race, normalises it. And I really do appreciate whenever that gets done at the National Road Series level or events.
Yeah, and I think with the type of crit on Friday night, no one left before the women started. It was really good to see. Everyone stayed to watch the women. It's still just as fast and exciting of a race as the men's. It was a little bit different to the men's, but it was a very exciting race. The type of course it's on makes it very good for spectator watching, especially if you stood on the corner with a beverage in hand.
Fantastic finish to the women's race. The men's race for the Criterium the other night, Friday night, 2 riders went off the front. Tom Chester got the win ahead of Ryan Thomas. So you had your breakaway group for half of the race, whereas the women, it did come down to a bunch sprint, and it was so close to call. Lucy Phidias wasn't sure if she'd won the race at all. It was really spectacular. See the riders there just coming through the chicane right up the back of the motorbike, as we're getting very close now towards the finish here at the showgrounds. Left-hand side, still the breakaway group of 4, riding very well as we see Cranage in the yellow colours for Criterium, just popping onto the back of that quartet.
Yeah, and the women are coming into the finish now. They've got a bit of a left-right into the finish, so I think it'll be a really good bunch. It is a bunch, so it's going to be a good finish, and it's anyone's game at this point.
Max Campbell, we saw from Tandem Co Pro Cycling, missing a couple of turns from this group of 4 on the left. So just perhaps saving his legs a little bit for a bunch sprint, or maybe struggling a little bit, because it's a huge effort for 4 riders to try and hold off that peloton. We're not sure what the time gap is. We're not getting some shots of the peloton itself, but surely they're not that far behind. They must be chasing those 4 riders. They are not going to be allowed to just have the race and let them ride away. ARA, Team Bridge Lane, they must be doing something, unless there's a big team dispute happening behind. Then it's advantage to the 4 out in front.
Yeah, we just don't know what's going on behind at the moment. And they are only about 5 kilometres from the finish, so they're very close. They might even be a little bit less than that right now. And we do have the women coming into the finish.
And really fast around the corner now, so you can see this is the finish. So here we go. It's Team Bridge Lane that's on the front. That's Felicity Wilson-Heffern, I think it might be. And it is a Bridge Lane. 1-2, Gina Ricciardo in second position.
Hayley Fuller in first.
Hayley Fuller, there you go. So Hayley Fuller first, Gina Ricciardo second, Bridge Lane 1-2. We spoke up ARA Skip Capital because they had 2 super fast sprinters, and Team Bridge Lane absolutely wiped the roads with them.
There was a little bit of an uphill before the downhill though, so it does make a difference if you are like that. And they did come around the corner. Hayley Fuller had 5 metres on the best of the bunch around the corner, so her bike skills really came into that one.
Well, such a short distance from the final corner to the sprint, so that's going to be really interesting in the men's race as well, to see who gets around that corner. Well, it's going to be a fight for position, not just for the final sprint, it is to that final corner, and that's what we saw there in the women's race. So Hayley Fuller gets the win in the Tour de Brisbane. That's going to be interesting for the overall National Road Series standings. We'll wait for confirmation now of the minor placings. Where was the overall leader, Sophie Edwards? She has the lead in the overall series, but what damage has been done to that lead? 4 riders still away, working hard together. Cranage at the back here. Max Campbell, Andy Sampson. Also up there, Blackshaw Racing in the mix. So Tandem Co, Criterion Racing, Blackshaw Racing. Great to see 3 teams that are not the 2 big dominant teams in the front of a National Road Series event.
Yeah, and there's only about 3 kilometres to go from here, so this is really putting it down to the wire. We were not expecting a group. We were expecting it to go over the climb, but not to go on the flat section. So it's going to be an interesting finish, I think.
I like it. And to see the mix of newer names and some of the lesser known teams really throwing it to the big stars of the National Road Series. So this is fantastic. These little kickers, though, they hurt so much. They've been on the edge, these 4 riders, like a team pursuit or a team time trial, pushing as hard as they possibly can. And every little rise like this hurts so much more than it normally would. Motorbike comes to the front. Does that mean the peloton's coming? It does. Peloton now catching those 4 riders. It's over for that quartet. And a solo move over the top of them, but the peloton is right there. Well, we were wondering where they were. They weren't too far behind at all, so the motorbike just getting out of the way before they got caught. And as we look a bit closer, we'll try and pick up who this rider is that's off the front on their own. It's going to be tough now. If 4 riders can't stay away, how can 1 rider hold off the entire field? This is going to be a huge challenge for him.
And it is another tandem rider, actually. But it is strung out. It's really strung out bunch now through the finish. But this attack has sat up, so they are bunching back together. It's about 2 kilometres to go from here, so we're really bringing it into the wire with, I'd say, around 50 riders.
It is a big group. Considering they went over Mount Coot-tha twice, it just shows the depth of levels in the National Road Series, that so many riders have kept themselves in contention despite those 2 really nasty ascents of Mount Coot-tha. It was Team Bridge Lane, 3 or perhaps 4 riders on the front of the peloton, bringing that tandem co-rider back. So Team Bridge Lane, as they go through this chicane, so you can see how challenging it is, so close to the finish, and if you hadn't moved up before that chicane, you are out of the race. There's no way you can surely come back from that and still be in contention.
You need to be in the top 15 at this point. It's a narrow road here with cars parked on either side, and then essentially a quick left move to the left and right hand straight into the finish. So these are tight roads now. We're really coming into the finish with, you can see how far away the front is at this point. They're 100 metres up the road. If you're not there, it's too late.
Well, the riders on the left there in the blue, they're Team Bridge Lane riders. So they have just peeled off. They've done their job. Oh, and it's Team Bridge Lane that have come around the first corner with a gap. Elliot Schultz it is, slightly out in front. ARA Skip Capital in second position. And it's Brady Gilmore. Look over the shoulder from Gilmore. Second in the Oceania Road Race yesterday and a win in the Tour de Brisbane today. Fantastic performance from the former motocross rider. He's a superstar on the bicycle now. Elliot Schultz in second place, and Tristan Saunders, the overall National Road Series leader, he holds on for third place. But what a ride from the ARA Skip Capital rider, Brady Gilmore, the former motocross rider. What a superstar on the bike. Once that group of 4 went away, though, it does appear, we didn't see the pictures of it, but I am suspecting it was Team Bridge Lane that did most of the work to bring it back. They certainly set their boys up for the final corner very well, but it was just their superior speed and power.
Yeah, so Hayley Fuller led this up the finish straight. She's in the saddle the whole way. She did come out of the corner first, and then her teammate Gina Ricciardo just, I think, got there for second, but Chloe Moran also is there, so we'll need to wait for a final confirmation on that.
Yeah, so Chloe Moran certainly in the mix for third, perhaps, for ARA, but it was Team Bridge Lane all the way for the elite women.
And we have our NRS champion female. We have Hayley Fuller with us. Now, Hayley, how was it out there today?
Yeah, it was definitely a tough race, but the girls all worked really hard and we had a solid plan going into the race and we executed it perfectly, so everyone's really happy.
And you haven't been with the team for too long. It was only your second time riding with the team, so how did you find that today?
I only signed a couple of weeks ago, so yeah, the second race, yesterday we had at Oshie's and we ended up in the under 23 for the Oceania, so that was really exciting. So to go 1-2 today is really good.
And we have our NRS males champion, so we have Brady Gilmore. Brady, it was close, mate, right to that final stage, but take us through the start of the race. Take us through each part of the race today.
Yeah, so was really early in the morning and then it was nice and cool, you know, and then straight out to Mount Coot-tha under the tunnel, and then up Coot-tha twice, and then basically 50 k's flat to the finish. And then because our GPS was cutting out under the tunnel, it didn't actually, the kilometres were reading low. So yeah, that showed up quite quick, the finish line, and we were a little bit out of position. So we had to do a bit of an effort, but we got there in the end and got in the prime position and then, yeah, just pulled it off.
Both races finishing in spectacular fashion, really fast rundowns to the line. Now, what was really fast as well was the LA King Street Kick It Criterium the other night, on Friday night here, under lights here in Brisbane. So before we have presentations, etc., we can have a quick look back to Friday night's LA Criterium, because Brady Gilmore also featured in that one as well. He had a breakaway in that particular race. Let's have a look at the Criterium from Friday night. Street racing on a Friday night in the heart of the city. The Brisbane Cycling Festival continued with the LA King Street Kick It Criteriums. Custom cycling clothing brand LA were again overjoyed to be involved with the exciting event. On a tight and challenging street course, and the racing did not disappoint the large crowd either. The elite women had 40 minutes of racing before the final 2 laps would be signalled by Chief Commissaire Tony Tor. The majority of the peloton were together at the halfway point when Ella Sibley and Claudia Marks unfortunately slid out around the corner. Thankfully, neither rider was badly hurt in the crash. With 2 laps to go, teenager Belinda Bailey from the ICE Step Forward squad tried to jump clear, but the ARA Skip Capital team quickly took control, neutralising the move, and started a lead-out train for Alex Martin Wallace as they passed the bell for the final lap. Martin Wallace did sprint to a podium position in 3rd, but Lucy Phidias was too fast for Bridge Lane's Keely Bennett, getting a well-deserved win for the Cycling Development Foundation.
I was a bit confused after the line. I saw the second place, do a bit of a fist bump as like she won, so I thought maybe I got that wrong, maybe I didn't. But I've since been told quite recently that I did in fact get it, so yeah, it's good.
Well, we thought it was clear on the line that you got the win, but obviously it was close enough for you to see that celebration and then start to second guess it.
Yeah, well, actually everyone came to me there's multiple phones filming the end. One of the photographers got a photo of the finish line just afterwards, and I thought, oh, wait, I might have actually got that.
Did you think you'd won?
Yeah, I thought they called my name when I went across the line, and I was actually getting mistaken as Hayley Fuller the whole race. So, no, I thought that I heard Keely Bennett over the line, and then I did a little fist bump. So, no. Anyway, that's racing, and, it was very close, but just happy that I could be there at the end.
The men lined up for their 50-minute plus 2-lap race, and with a slightly bigger field, the pace was hot right from the start. Riders quickly started dropping off the back as the high speed reduced the peloton significantly. The Australian Criterium champion Graham Frisley was hoping his Caish team could control the group, but Blackshaw Racing's Tom Chesters and Ryan Thomas from Tandem Co jumped clear and quickly opened up a big gap. The powerful duo combined well, and it was clear the peloton didn't have an answer to the move. Brady Gilmore tried to get across for ARA Skip Capital, but after several laps in between the groups, he was eventually reeled back to the main field, which was the catalyst for New Zealand's Keegan Hornblow to show his good form and move clear. Meanwhile, up front, Chesters and Thomas had stretched their lead, and it was a race in 2. Ryan Thomas led the sprint out, but Chesters had just that little bit more punch to narrowly beat Ryan to win the LA Kick It Criterium. Hornblow signalled his arrival in Australia by staying clear of the peloton to claim 3rd, with Frisley winning the bunch kick for 4th.
Yeah, happy to translate that into a win for the new team, so yeah, pretty pumped.
You did tell me that you have retired. Not bad for a retiree.
Yeah, hung up the boots last year. Still doing a bit of riding, but not really training much, so just de-essing now, so thought I'd come and wave the tandem flag nice and high out there tonight.
The weekend would now be filled with Saturday's Oceania Road Race Championship and the Tour de Brisbane on Sunday. Well, great images there of the Story Bridge in the heart of Brisbane, across the Brisbane River, and Ryan Thomas at the end there as well, so it was good to see him. We mentioned him in the coverage, how he did cramp up at the end of the Criterium the other day, so fantastic. Joel, you've got someone down there. Who you got that's been out there involved? I think it's Balmoral Cycling Club. You'll be happy about this, Hayley Jones.
Thanks, Scott. We're down here with Saul now. Saul from the Balmoral Racing Squad. He finished in the top pack. And he was just telling me off mic how the etiquette was in the peloton today. So, Saul, how was it out there? 102 Ks, and it was pretty savage.
Oh, yeah, a few things that I can't say on the news, but, gentlemanly behaviour as well, like calling out the obstacles and, giving each other a push every now and then. So, yeah, that was pretty good.
And talk us through, how was it when the pack got to Mount Coot-tha there? So it's a little bit of elevation, 2 times around.
Yeah.
What was it like? What was the team tactics like? And was it just hold on for you guys?
Yeah, that's it, mate. Like, it's always pretty fast through Legacy, so not much you can do. And then just like, up Coot-tha. Not much you can do. So, managed to make the front group, just chase back on. And then, front group stayed away all the way out to the airport. And then we're all back together. Crazy, big sprinters and all that kind of stuff. Not my forte, unfortunately.
And of course, cyclists love their data. So talk us through, what was top speeds for you out there on the course today as you're doing the descent down Mount Coot-tha?
It was a bit slower today. I didn't even crack 90. So the big Hyundai eludes me for another year. If NX Sports can make us descend on the wrong side of the road next time, that'd be a bit faster, I reckon.
So we go just under 90 today. What was the average watts out there for us today?
Oh, for me, I think it was about 250. Yep.
So 102 Ks, 250 watts. So a lot of people will be trying to do that on their wind trainer this afternoon, I'm guessing, Saul. But
you could not do that on
well
the
done,
wind
mate.
trainer.
And what do you think about the course changes here with the Tour de Brisbane as well?
More Coot-thas next time, please. And a tinsel at the end as well.
So a little bit more Coot-thas, and it wasn't too bad. A nice flat finish for you guys. But congratulations, mate, the Balmoral Racing Squad. Done proud, and you've done a great effort out there. Well done, Saul.
Thank you very much.
And back up to you, Scott and Hayley.
Well, fantastic racing here. The second round of Oz Cycling's National Road Series, the Tour de Brisbane, thanks to Australian Unity, have been run and won. So great rides by Brady Gilmore and also Hayley Fuller to win both those races. There is also the under-23 element within those races, so you can check the results to see who finished where and where the overall point standings will be. That may not be done until tomorrow for the overall National Series. The next race, though, that is the Grafton to Inverell. It's the toughest one-day race in Australia. We are all looking forward to seeing how that plays out. So I'm Scott McGrory, and Hayley Jones, thanks so much for joining us. Your first time commentating the National Road Series. You did a great job.
It is my first time, so no judgment, please. But, hopefully I'll be back for some more later in the year.
I've judged you already. I've judged you well. You've done really well. So thanks, Hayley. And you gave us that local Brisbane element to what we really wanted to have. So thanks so much, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. And good luck to all of the riders as they now prepare for the next round of the National Road Series, the Grafton to Inverell. Until then, see you later.
The Tour de Brisbane